Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto lost himself to the bloodlust of the Kyuubi at the Valley of the End part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. It begins. There was a sort of pall in the air. Kakashi idly mused as he approached the Valley of the End, where his two students, promising young shinobi, both were fighting. He felt disgusted in Sasuke's behavior, as he had disobeyed the very advice that Kakashi had given barely 24 hours earlier. And loath as he is to admit it, Sasuke will have to pay for his actions, last of his clan or no. The sky darkened as he approached the cliff face that separated the land of fire from the land of sound, and the pall in the air thickened, making it rather trying in terms of breathing normally. For civilians, it might seem as though the air was too thick to breathe, but for as seasoned a jonin as him, it was hardly noticeable. The scene he came upon, however, could not be so lightly ignored. Rasengan, Chidori, both are powerful jutsu in their own rights, even working to counterbalance each other in terms of chakra usage. Rasengan, the ultimate form of shape transformation. So powerfully condensed that, in the right hands, it could rend even the most powerful of barriers to dust. Chidori, the ultimate form of nature transformation. What it lacks in destructive power, it more than makes up for in its ability to pierce almost anything that it comes across. Kakashi had only once wondered what would happen if the two were to clash, and that had been 3 days ago, not even. He had come to the conclusion that the outcome of such a thing would kill both users. Apparently, he hadn't taken into account two things. 1. The practically inhuman regenerative power that the Kyuubi gave Naruto. 2. The curse seal, level 2. Granted, Kakashi only knew about one of those two, and had only the barest of information on the other. But he had thought that he knew exactly what would happen should the two jutsu go against each other. But because of the two things he hadn't taken into account, he was wrong, and all the proof was in front of him. Sasuke watched on as Naruto lay where he'd been launched. He knew that had either of their aim been off by even the slightest of millimeters, then both of their jutsu would have been exponentially more powerful from drawing on the other, killing both users. Luck, Sasuke thought, was the only thing that kept them alive. Was the only thing keeping Naruto alive, but not anymore. Sasuke thought, standing over his ex-teammate. Your luck has run out, Naruto. He pulled out a kunai, his chakra reserves too diminished to do another jutsu, and moved to strike. The next thing he saw was the angry red of Naruto's eyes before being launched back. How could he still have power? Sasuke calculated his chances of winning the fight as is, then made a wise decision: leave Naruto alive and kill him another day. And it was the last that anyone of Konoha would see of Uchiha Sasuke for years to come. Kakashi snapped himself out of his stupor. What was he doing, standing there gaping like an academy student in the presence of the Hokage? He rushed forth to catch the fleeing Sasuke, but was stopped by a swipe from Naruto. Naruto, what was all Kakashi let out before he met the red eyes of his student, and realized the truth. That wasn't Naruto he was fighting. It was Kyuubi. So Kakashi-sensei, you're my next opponent, are you? Naruto's voice cut through the air like glass. Kakashi was floored. Naruto was in control? And he was still attacking his teacher like they were enemies. Kakashi dodged another swipe, then a kick, before retaliating with one of his own. He reached into his pouch, pulling out something he never thought he'd have to utilize. Back when Kakashi had made the passing of Team 7 official, the Sandaime had given him a small bundle of chakra-suppressing seals, as it was entirely possible that Naruto would have to draw upon Kyuubi's chakra, and they had no basis for how much control he would have. The Sandaime had shared the whole truth to Naruto, that the Shodai's wife had been the first Jinchuriki for Kyuubi, and Naruto's mother the second, with Naruto being the third. He also said that Mito had never had need to call upon Kyuubi's chakra, and that Kushina's chakra was somehow particularly effective in controlling Kyuubi's chakra. As such, there was no idea how it would affect Naruto, as he would have need to use the demonic chakra, and it was quite obvious that Naruto didn't have the same chakra anomaly that his mother had. At the time, such a thing had seemed quite idiotic. After all, how could Naruto, naive, cheerful Naruto, lose himself in a bloody rage? Kakashi had just found out how wrong they'd been. He moved in close, slapping one of the seals upon Naruto, before suitably restraining him and heading back to Konoha. Kakashi could feel it in his heart. He'd lost the last remaining family of his friend, and shortly after, may have lost the only remaining tie to his sensei. He was too late, always too late. The return had been unnaturally somber. Sakura stood vigil at the gate, having seen the team of medics come and pass, waiting for her sensei to return with her teammates in tow. She had become even more distraught at the sight of the injured members of the team that had returned thus far, and was afraid of how horribly injured Sasuke and Naruto. No, not Naruto. He'd had a bad habit of bouncing back from injury almost immediately. He'd just have a few scrapes, probably a broken arm to complain about. Yeah, Naruto will be alright, Sakura affirmed, calmer than before, which was why she was stunned to see that, when the final group of Mednines returned with Kakashi, not even 5 minutes had passed since the group escorting Lee and, Sakura shivered, Gaara, had returned, carrying a bound Naruto. Sensei, what happened? Why is Naruto tied up? Where's Sasuke? She looked up to her teacher in the hope that he would give her words of comfort. All she got in return was that the mission was a failure, and to head home and await further orders. And suddenly it all made sense. Mission failure, failure. Sasuke wasn't coming back, and something had happened to Naruto. Maybe he'd just been too stubborn and Kakashi had had to restrain and knock him out. Sakura nodded to herself, once more comforted by her own conclusions. After all, for what reason would Kakashi have to restrain Naruto outside of his stubbornness? The room was white, almost blindingly so. The room itself bare, save for a single hospital bed, with a patient strapped upon it. At the moment, the boy, 13 years of age, was only wearing a black t-shirt and solid blue boxers. His blonde hair was spread across his head, framing his tanned face, where each cheek held 3 black lines birthmarks, with startling perfection. He looks almost peaceful, Tsunade mused, as she checked over him one last time for the night. No injuries. Patient is presently unconscious and restrained due to uncharacteristic aggression. Tsunade muttered under her breath and into a voice recorder, an old habit that doctors and mednines got into long ago. Her hand was glowing green with the effects of the mystical palm jutsu. She moved to his head, turning it to the side with her other hand. No chemical imbalances, but limbic system appears inflamed. Attempting to he, Tsunade was cut short as her mystical palm turned against her, becoming red and scalding her. She put an end to the jutsu and set about fixing her burned hand. I believe I've found the source of the aggression. It appears to be an annex of demonic chakra that has contained itself within the limbic system. Whether it is there because of patient's affliction or something else has yet to be known. She continued, consummate professional that she was, and was careful to avoid mentioning Kyuubi. After all, you never know who might listen to the recording. Tomorrow I stop the sedatives for the patient's safety, and Jiraiya will come by that afternoon to perform his own check, as the presence of demonic chakra calls for his expertise. Tsunade is a professional, and she prides herself on remaining calm in even the most dire of medical situations, yet when Kakashi had come to her begging that she fix his student in the most heartbroken of voices, she had first thought that Naruto was dying. Her first order of business was to remove the chakra restraining seal, as such a thing was dangerous for the patient. Medical jutsu relied as much on the chakra of the patient as it did the user. It worked by turning the user's chakra into a bastardized version of nature energy, allowing the user to copy the patient's chakra and manipulate it to heal the patient. Though there was the potential for backlash, for if the patient's chakra was overly unique, like having an elemental Kekkei Genkai, then it would attack the user, whose body was unused to using such a chakra. And so, Tsunade removed the chakra restraining seal at the protest of Kakashi. Naruto had stirred as Tsunade started healing him. Kakashi's heart almost stopped when Naruto swiftly moved to rip out Tsunade's throat, but he was able to restrain him before that happened. Tsunade hadn't known about Naruto's odd aggression, and had immediately ordered that he be restrained. Naruto had bit, scratched and kicked as he was placed in the restraints, and had begun spouting obscenities at them, saying that they were idiots, weaklings, that they deserved to die. She didn't know what had gotten into him, and then he turned on her. He begun by saying how pathetic she was, how it was all her fault. She wasn't strict enough to make her brother patient, so he had rushed out into the battle and died. She wasn't a good enough medic, as she hadn't been able to keep her lover, her fiancé, alive. He'd flung all kinds of insults at her after that, but it was those that had hurt the worst. She'd finally regained her composure while he was childishly taunting her through song, and ordered that he be heavily sedated, and to keep him under sedation for as long as they could. That had been a week ago. Come on, sensei, Naruto wakes up today. Ino scolded her teacher, who was starting to lag far behind her. Next to him was her teammate, Shikamaru. You too, you lazy bum. The passers-by would later swear that they heard the young Nara boy breathe, literally breathe, the word troublesome. Granted, Team 10 was not alone in their trek to the hospital. The remainder of Teams 8, 7 and Guy were also with them, going to visit not just Naruto, but their injured teammates and friends, who were good enough to move around. All of them were planning on being there as Naruto woke up. While the students were chattering on and on about what was new in their lives, the Jonin sensei weren't as joyous about the news concerning Naruto. The official story was that Naruto's injuries had forced the mednine to place him in a medically induced coma, so as to spare him from the pain of recovery. But Kakashi had known the truth, had been there as the mednines held down Naruto's arm and stabbed him with the needle, had been there as Tsunade made everyone, with the exception of Kakashi, who knew that she would need consoling, leave while she broke down crying, cradling Kakashi as if he was her lifeline. He, however, did not need consoling himself. That part of him had died when he learned that Naruto was in control and not using the Kyuubi's chakra. Had died when he saw Sasuke leave forever and had failed to stop him. Kakashi had told the Jonin sensei of Naruto's former classmates and friends, and they appeared insufficiently wary, in Kakashi's eyes. Kakashi sensei, were you even listening to me? Yes. What is it, Sakura? Thank God he'd been able to fake being like he was before. First chance he'd get, Kakashi would go back into ANBU, and there he would remain for the rest of his days, if all went in his favor. I said we're here. Now, which room is Naruto in? They wouldn't allow visitors before. She looked put off about that little bit of information, and went off on a bunch of dark mutterings about how could you disturb the patient if the doctors put them in a coma. She'd been distraught over hearing that the mission was a failure, and had spent several days moping before Ino had gotten to her. She told Sakura that it was unbecoming of budding kunoichi like them to spend all their time wallowing in their feelings when they just needed to get stronger. She then revealed that she'd been exaggerating her feelings for Sasuke for all this time just to provoke Sakura into becoming more outspoken. Sakura took to the advice and was back to her old self in no time, even going so far as to reconcile her friendship with Ino. Kakashi made a well-timed eye smile at the antics of his student, before mentioning that Naruto was in the second floor of the South Ward. What he didn't mention was that the South Ward held all the violent patients. Thank God the rooms were soundproofed. You have good timing. I was just about to pull him off the sedatives and wake him up. Migaki, the mednin in charge, said. He was a rather unassuming man, with short, dark almost black hair and equally dark eyes. He wore the traditional mednin scrubs with a scrub cap upon his head. Sakura was relieved. For a second there, her fear had taken over and made her think that something had come up and he had had to be put back in the coma. She stood with the rest of the Konoha 12, the Konoha 11 as Naruto began stirring. Choji and Niji were wheelchair-bound while Kiba had been healed enough that he could walk, and had worn a simple tee and a pair of shorts, both a dark brownish black. Naruto woke up, and immediately began groaning. He made to clutch his head, but was stopped by the restraints, the action making their presence known to the genin, and one chunin, present. Hey Naruto. How are you feeling? Sakura's soft words didn't seem to have an effect, and Migaki began to tell her about how he might not be completely lucid, and to not have high hopes for good conversation when Naruto interrupted him. How am I feeling? Well, I was feeling good until your weak ass decided to reveal itself. His eyes opened, the irises blood red, but nobody really took note of such a thing compared to what he'd just said. Naruto, why do you say such a thing? Sakura tried to make light of his insult, while the others were too shocked to speak. I said it 'cause that's what you are. Weak. What, you decide to come here to reaffirm that you're a better ninja than I am? Heh, or maybe you're here to cover up that you know you're weak, and hope that you can keep up your facade that you're a competent kunoichi, when everyone here knows that you'd rather spend more time on your looks than train. Naruto's words were like ice in the heart, cutting Sakura and freezing the blood in her veins beyond belief. Don't say such a stupid thing, you idiot. Ino retaliated in Sakura's defense, and Naruto turned on her, like you're much better. Unlike her, you actually had potential, but chose to waste it for what? The sake of a friend that fought you every chance she got? Had you been smarter, you would have won your match in the preliminaries. Now Ino was sent reeling from his words, and her teammates went to her defense. Naruto. Shikamaru got his attention. This isn't you, remember? Actually, Shikamaru, this is me, and you're smart enough to notice it. In fact, you're such a brainiac that you don't account for the variables. How's it feel, to know that the very first mission you led was such a failure? To know that it was your actions that almost got everybody killed? That's enough. Asuma wasn't happy. Far from it. He'd heard that Naruto wasn't like the rumors had said. That he wasn't the monster that everybody thought he was. And he thought that he had been smart in not believing them, when he saw the kid's performance in the preliminaries and against the Hyuga boy. Now, however, he was calling his decision into question. Don't think I'll just sit back and let you insult my students. Of course not. It's very obvious that you're fond of them, just like everyone knows that you are Kurenai are dating. We are not, Kurenai began to retort, but was cut off. Of course you are. It's obvious to everyone that the two of you are dancing the horizontal tango. Naruto cut them off, eliciting flustered, half-hearted denials. Naruto, that was very unyouthful of you. Lee joined the conversation, Guy agreeing with him. Unyouthful, you say? Perhaps what's unyouthful, Naruto made the word sound like the worst of insults, is that you think that you can survive as a ninja when you are incapable of using the most basic of jutsu. There will come a time when sheer strength will get you killed, Lee. And as for you, Guy, you hide behind your words of youth to deceive people into thinking that you're just a coward. Coward, always running to be better than your idol, your so-called rival. Naruto's face, which everyone half expected to be marred with a crazed look, instead only held pure, icy calculation. His eyes were like crimson glaciers. All of you are weak. Choji, too self-conscious about his size to reach his potential. Niji, working himself ragged to prove an idiotic point to his uncle. Kiba, your pride speaks for itself, and it says that it will be your death. Hell, it was almost the death of your precious puppy. Kiba had to be held back until the comment about almost killing Akamaru reached his ears. Tenten, always working to prove that she'll be more than average, when she knows that she's already reached her potential. The kunoichi in question shifted uncomfortably. While the two hadn't exactly been close, their friendship was really only in passing. Shino. No matter how hard you try, your emotions lead your actions, and that's why people are wary of you. It's not that you have a hive of bugs living and crawling inside of you, but rather that you aren't as in control of your emotions as you think you are, and that scares people away. You'll be lucky to find a girl, the way you are. And finally, Kakashi-sensei. Naruto had turned to Kakashi, who had been slowly moving towards the door behind the distraught group of people. So caring, despite how aloof you appear. Tell me, does your heart have anything left in it, Or are you already faking that you haven't died inside? Kakashi had frozen, his hand upon the door handle, and just stood there. He said nothing, which prompted Naruto to further taunt him. I don't blame you really. After all, everyone you opened your heart to left you, either dying or turning traitor. Your old team died and left you alone when you needed them most. Your most promising student turned traitor the first chance he got, and let's not forget your father. And just like that, Kakashi snapped. He had to be held back from killing Naruto, all the Jonin restraining him. Guy had him in an armhold, his hands joined behind Kakashi's head. Asuma was restraining his legs, and Kurenai had to put him in her best incapacitating genjutsu. Naruto had stopped speaking, opting instead to simply grin like the cat that caught the canary. Let's leave. Asuma's cold words worked to bring the others out of their stupor. The door was opened, and it was as though the floodgates were opened in full. Everyone left, and Naruto started to laugh. That's right. Leave. Leave like the weak cowards you are. He laughed after them, the words sticking to the group. The door closed, and Naruto was left to himself. It isn't the seal. The voice of a man cuts through the air, disturbing the almost silence of the room. The only sound being the grunting of the patient restrained to the bed as he tried to kill the almost 7-foot-tall man leaning above him. Naruto's mouth had been gagged after he'd harshly bitten the medanin who'd come in for the routine checkup. The man, a rather inexperienced medanin with a fair bit of potential, lost a chunk of skin and had to have one of his fingers reattached. After it was wrestled out of Naruto's mouth, though, the guy had almost resigned. Then what's causing the demonic chakra in his limbic system? Tsunade hit it well, but Jiraiya could easily pick up the undercurrent of desperation. Looking at the red-eyed boy next to him, who was eyeing the Sannin like he was a piece of meat to be had, he sighed. I've some theories about it, but I don't think you'll like either of them. What are they? This time, hope was prevalent in her voice. The first is that it's some of Kyuubi's chakra that simply was pulled from the seal, but somehow lingered in the part of his brain that acts as the conduit for him to draw upon it. If that was the case, then it should be easy to simply heal away. Jiraiya looked at Tsunade, and instantly knew that she'd already tried it. And obviously failed, he sighed, moving on to the other options so as to not make her feel any worse. The second isn't something I'd like to even consider, but given the circumstances surrounding him. What else is going on, Jiraiya? A hint of his teammate as she was at her prime. He had no choice but to tell her the truth. The reason it took me so long to get here was that I was at my boku. The toads are in a flurry. When Naruto signed the contract, it was in blood. Binding and, as it should be, irreversible. But his signature is evaporating into nothing, and when it's completely gone, so is his summoning contract with the toads. They fell into silence, looking at the child in between them, who was looking at the both of them, as if deciding which of the two would be tastier. Perhaps he is, Jiraiya mused regretfully. He'd failed to protect his godson. What about your other theory? Tsunade broke him out of his negative spiraling. The second theory is that this is a function of the seal that I don't know about. That this was supposed to happen. I doubt that's the answer, but there's nothing to suggest that it isn't. He looked away, defeated. Then what do we do? Tsunade looked lost at the hopelessness of the situation. I've done what I can. You're the Hokage, so anything else is up to you. Jiraiya didn't say what was on both of their minds. Is there anything left of our Naruto? Team Guy wasn't the same. Guy had been somber for several hours afterward, until he suddenly sprang up anew, shouting that he will do everything in his power to prove Naruto's words wrong. Lee was the same, until a rousing speech from Guy about the ninja of old having no chakra at all, yet still being the greatest made his vigor return with a vengeance. Tenten consoled herself with the knowledge that she still had many skills that she could refine and build up. Niji had openly admitted that he originally had become so strong to spite his uncle, but that now he was working hard to prove to his father that he could make his own choices. It was the same as before, and yet, nothing was the same. Teams 10 and 8 certainly changed after that day with Naruto. Asuma and Kurenai had stopped their relationship until both of them were okay with the idea of openly dating. Choji had recently been released from the hospital, but he didn't have much of an appetite, worrying his parents. Ino had gone into her training with a vengeance, utterly determined to prove that she had what it takes to make Chunin. The action hadn't gone unnoticed by Sakura, who'd quickly joined her. Both of them had made up, and silently chose to forgive and forget. Shikamaru had practically fallen into a kind of depression. The weight of his failed mission, compounded by Naruto's words, had gotten to him, but it was the words of his father one night that helped him get past it. Now, Team 10 was on the road to recovery. Team 8, on the other hand, was a veritable mess. Kiba had taken Naruto's cutting words to heart, and now was nursing a heavy grudge at Naruto. Sure, some part of him knew that Naruto wasn't in his right mind, but he couldn't just take what he'd said without some form or retribution. Shino had been rather closed off, but his behavior suggested that the blonde's remarks hit too close for comfort. The group could only figure that it was simply Hinata's meek appearance that kept her safe from Naruto's wrath, while Hinata simply took it that somewhere, deep down, Naruto remembered his promise to protect her, and that it proved that he was still in there. Team 8 feared that her conclusion was wrong, and didn't know how they could deal with the fallout of Naruto and Hinata. The room was simple enough. There was a low-set coffee table in the middle of the small room, with 2 couches on either side of it. On the upper wall to the right of the door were 4 pictures, each of a different man. These people were the previous Hokages, and soon there was to be a 5th picture, of a woman with amber eyes, dirty blonde hair, and a gray-purple diamond tattoo on the middle of her forehead. That woman, Senju Tsunade, was currently in the room, waiting with her 2 elderly advisors, a bespectacled man by the name of Mitokado Hamura, and a woman with her hair done up in a bun, Yutane Koharu. They were awaiting the 4th member of their party, the unofficial 3rd advisor, Shimura Danzo, a man just as old as the other advisors, whose only defining feature was the bandages that covered his right eye and arm. The man in question entered the quiet room, and sat down next to Tsunade. Now that we are all here, we can begin to discuss the matter at hand. Koharu spoke first. Uzumaki Naruto. Danzo put forth his thoughts on the matter. He's gone berserk after overusing the Kyuubi. That's right. Tsunade confirmed. Naruto's currently restrained in the south ward of Konoha General. For the past week we've had him in a medically induced coma, from which he was taken out of early today. Why did you end the coma? Hamura inquired. Any longer, and it would prove detrimental for his health. And do you know what is causing him to act this way? Danzo spoke up again, genuinely interested in the proceedings. After numerous tests, it's been proven that the cause is a concentration of demonic chakra in his limbic system, making him excessively aggressive and bloodthirsty to the point where he had to be gagged for biting the finger off of one of the medics while he was performing rounds. Tsunade replied, unsure about the man's intentions. We've done all we can to remove it, to disperse it, and yet it remains there. Jiraiya himself checked the seal, and found that nothing was wrong. He theorizes that it may simply be an obscure part of the seal activating to allow Naruto to better access and control the Kyuubi's chakra, but doubts it. Then what do we do? Kohara asked of them. We cannot afford to leave him like this, nor is there an easy solution to this problem. Open banishment. Hamura's voice cuts through the air, silencing everyone in the room. We do our best to seal off his chakra. Temporary or permanent, the important thing is that it lasts for some time. We use his condition as an excuse to remove him from the shinobi ranks, and keep up the story that he's in the South Ward. You, Tsunade, have it set up so that he's isolated, that way no one comes trying to visit him. From what I've heard, Naruto has already done the correct actions required to place him in permanent isolation. A team of ANBU is selected to escort Uzumaki, unconscious, on the far edge of the Land of Fire. Hamura continued to the group, whom gave him their rapt attention. He will be given nothing but several scrolls, one explaining his situation, a second one will hold maps of the elemental nations, including the locations of the hidden villages, with the sole exception of Konoha. The last one is something Hiruzen wanted Naruto to have when he reached 13, and had hoped to bequeath to Naruto personally. It holds an edited account of his mother, telling him everything with the sole exception of his father, and her status as the Kyuubi's second Jinchuriki. And how is that a good solution? Danzo questioned, for once appearing to side with Tsunade, as she also asked that question. The open banishment allows us to remove him until such a time that he is back to his former self. When that happens we simply have the toads summon him. That won't be happening. Jiraiya stated that Naruto's somehow been removed from the contract as their summoner. He thinks that it may be a part of his condition, but the removal of a summoner from any of the summons is unprecedented. Tsunade explained. Then we'll have Jiraiya set his spy network to keep tabs upon the boy. When he is mentally sound, we'll send to have him return. Hamura finished. Keeping tabs on the boy will prove to be a daunting task. Back before he made genin, he was quite adept at running circles around many of our best in-village hunternin, along with a fair number of our best out-village hunternin. Danzo stated. Don't underestimate Jiraiya's network. Tsunade said. Don't underestimate the Uzumaki boy. Danzo countered. So we are in agreement. Kohara butted in. Uzumaki Naruto will be removed from the shinobi ranks and placed into open banishment, with South Ward isolation being the official story. Agreed. Hamura stated. Agreed. Danzo commented. They looked at Tsunade, who had a clear goal in mind. Agreed. Oh, Hinata, what are you doing here? Iruka was on his way to the hospital when he found his former student at the front desk, asking if Naruto had been moved. I was just checking to see if there was any change in Naruto's location. She meekly replied, and Iruka wondered if the blonde genin had gained some clue about Hinata's crush on him. Leaving that thought for another time, he simply smiled and asked that she lead the way. The room was exactly the same, with the sole exception that Naruto's mouth had a gag in it, placed in such a way that it didn't hinder his breathing. Iruka was shocked to see his favorite former student in such a horrible state, that he immediately ran over to remove the gag, not noticing the red eyes or the hungry look that Naruto was giving him. He was barely able to dodge Naruto's jaw as it snapped shut where his hand had been not even a second before. Naruto, what Iruka wasn't able to finish his sentence as he finally noticed the crimson eyes glaring at him. Iruka-sensei. The smile Naruto was giving him was fundamentally the same as his usual toothy smile, but it was completely different. Can you please untie me? The doctors here won't accept that I'm fine. Iruka almost believed it, as that was expected behavior of Naruto, but had enough common sense to give the right answer. Sorry Naruto, But Iruka was cut off by Naruto's sudden outburst. Untie me, you sorry excuse for a ninja! Naruto screamed, shocking the Chunin, and making Hinata let out a small eep, which brought her to his attention. He immediately went back to his overly polite self, as though the outburst had never happened. Hinata! I didn't see you there? Can you untie me? He gave her the sad eyes, and she almost complied. Almost. I apologize, and Naruto, but and then he snapped once more. For fuck's sake, you god's awful woman, get your pansy ass over here and untie me right now. His voice didn't rise like before, but it wasn't exactly forthcoming either. She didn't move from her spot as Iruka started to realize just why Naruto had been gagged. Did I stutter? No, wait, you'd definitely hear me if I'd stuttered. Jay just lit Kyoyu. His voice became horribly mocking, and it brought Hinata to tears. Naruto, there's something wrong with you. It was a pure statement of fact, nothing more, nothing less. Of course there's something wrong with me. It's that I'm not feeling your heart in my hands as I squeeze the last dregs of life out of it. That I'm not doing my damn best to make that thing next to you beg me to kill it. He started going off on a rant about how unfair it was that they wouldn't let him do as he pleased, and Iruka couldn't take any more of it. He swiftly moved forward, pinning Naruto's head to the bead with his left hand as he reattached the gag with his right. Iruka left Naruto's room feeling nothing but grief that the child that he'd once taken a liking to had become this monster. With him was an openly sobbing Hyuga Hinata. That was the last time anyone Naruto knew from Konoha would see him for years. The banishment itself was a rather silent affair. Tsunade had injected Naruto with a tranquilizer, so he was sufficiently suited for his banishment. The ANBU team that had been assembled had been given a backpack holding several days' worth of clothing, some flint, a half-dozen kunai, a small tarp and the agreed-upon scrolls. Jiraiya had come and sealed up Naruto's chakra, stating that they should include the information about his chakra being sealed in the explanatory scroll. He'd also said that the seal would only last 2-3 days max. And then the time came. Naruto was slung over the shoulder of one of the ANBU, whose mask looked feline in nature. The man, who had short brown hair, simply nodded to his team, took one last look at the village from the gates, and left. As they traveled under the moonlight, one of the feline-masked ANBU's subordinates noticed the string of a necklace break as they moved, and picked it up as it fell. The necklace was simple, appearing to be a geometric cylinder of jade between two tiny bells. She pocketed the necklace to give to the Hokage when they returned. Finally, after several hours of moving as fast as they could, they stopped near the border between the land of fire and the land of wind. The ANBU who had pocketed the necklace watched as her commander set down the boy and checked to make sure that everything that he was to be left with was in order. She also suspected that he marked where they were on the map of the elemental nations that the boy was to be left. A small consolation, it seemed, as soon after they left. Several hours later, Blue Eyes opened to view the sky above. The sun was shining low in the sky, framing the morning mist beautifully. The mist shimmered in the air, making all the colors appear brighter. The wood of the trees, the leaves on the branches, the dirt on the ground, all of it shined brighter by the mysterious work of the mist and sun. Bird began chirping happily at the sight, greeting the day and their animal neighbors. All of it proved to make a single point. Today was going to be a beautiful day, bright. That was the first thing that came to mind for Naruto. The second thought was Ao. Thinking hurt, his hearing hurt, everything hurt. Idly, he figured that this must be what Tsunade feels when she had a hangover, and immediately vowed that he would never be loud around her the next time Shizen said she had a hangover. And then he remembered, and the hangover was gone in an instant. No. No, 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 and oh. He cried out, sitting up suddenly. He opened his eyes, and looked around, confused and scared. He first noticed his clothes, a simple beige t-shirt with dirt brown pants. On his feet were open-toed boots, which were only the slightest bit big on him. In fact, everything he was wearing was kinda baggy on his lithe frame. The second thing he noticed was his location. It was a small meadow, surrounded by thick, lush beech trees. The branches arched out, giving the meadow some cover from the elements. In all, it was a perfect spot for anyone to camp out at. The third and final thing he noticed was the backpack near him, but it was almost ignored when his hangover came back with a vengeance. "Gah!" was the only thing that he could say as he clutched his head in his hands, pulling on his hair and bending into the fetal position in response to the pain. He pushed the pain back out of sheer willpower, and was almost too exhausted to crawl over to the backpack and dump its contents onto the ground. Inside were several pairs of the same clothes he was wearing, along with an equal number of. Naruto blushed when he noticed boxers. Is that silk? After he forced the clothes back inside the backpack, he found that there was a trio of scrolls, two addressed to him. He opened the unaddressed one first, finding that it was a map of the elemental nations, with a single mark upon it. It took him a few minutes to make the realization. That was his location. The map also showed the locations of important trade routes and the towns they crossed through, even going so far as to include the locations of all of the hidden villages, all with the sole exception of Konoha. The second scroll he opened had the words "Read Me" first printed upon it. It was a note, and it said this: Uzumaki Naruto, due to the circumstances surrounding your behavior following the failed mission to retrieve Uchiha Sasuke, I, Senju Tsunade, Godame Hokage of Konohagakure, do hereby remove you from the shinobi ranks and temporarily banish you from Konohagakure proper. Do not attempt any jutsu, as your chakra has been sealed, though the sealer has stated that it shall only last for several days. This means that you will not be considered a missing nin, but it does, however, mean that should you approach Konoha before the banishment is lifted, you shall be imprisoned and tried, with the outcome, should you be found guilty, of death. Naruto thought it was a joke. That they couldn't just leave banish him. Uzumaki Naruto, future Hokage, but he read on, and it slowly dawned on him that it wasn't a joke. I know you won't be happy upon hearing this news, and I know that the outcome of your early return isn't one that I'd ever wish upon you, but your actions have left me with no choice but to condone this solution. I hope you do the right thing and never return to Konoha. The banishment shall remain in place until Konoha is in need of your services once more. In need of his services. What, did they simply think that he was some kind of tool for them to use at their leisure? He read on, his disbelief growing. You have been left with some clothes, a map of the elemental nations and scroll that Sarutobi-sensei had wanted to give to you when you turned 13 concerning information that he wanted you to know. It was probably the old man's way of telling him about the fox, Naruto snorted. Old man Sandaime had always preferred not to give bad news in person, and told him so back when Naruto had first been given his apartment. He'd argued that if you weren't there in person to give the bad news, then how could you console them? The old man has simply chuckled at Naruto's antics, and replied that the news he had to give wasn't one that could be softened by being there to console them. Naruto went back to reading. Good luck on your journey. I desperately hope you don't hate us by the time I send for you. Senju Tsunade, Densetsu no Sanin, Godame Hokage, Konohagakure no Sato, Lady Hokage, the mission you've set us out on has been completed. Tora, the Anbu who had carried Naruto to the edge of the land of fire, reported. Tsunade nodded, and dismissed all but Tora, so that he could debrief her on the details. Nico, however, stayed. Is there a reason you've not left, Nico? Tora inquired, sounding as though he was using his spook face. Nico stood firm and inclined her head in the affirmative. Now, Tenzo. You both are standing in my presence, so you don't have to refer to each other by your codenames right now. Tsunade said, looking from one to the other as they removed their masks. So, what do you have to report, Yugao? The purple-haired woman stepped forward, giving a small bow of respect before starting. During the transport, she held out the necklace. Fell from the cargo. It was a testament to Yugao's professionalism that she was able to talk about an actual person as though they were an object. Tsunade looked at the object Yugao handed out, and her breath caught in her throat. The necklace. She thought, dreading what it meant for Naruto. The last time it had returned to her possession, Dan had died right in front of her eyes. She reached out and grabbed the necklace, thanking Yugao before putting it on once more. Did I do the right thing? Naruto had spent the better part of an hour ranting to himself about the unjustness of it all. Then he packed up everything, taking note of what wasn't mentioned in the scroll. He had a half-dozen kunai, several yards of ninja wire and an equal length of rope, flint and a canteen full of water. A search of the area revealed the existence of a river several meters from the meadow. He'd have searched further, but without his chakra to bolster his stamina, he couldn't travel further than roughly half a kilometer before he started to feel exhausted. Is this how the civilians feel when they try to do what ninja do? Naruto wondered as he collapsed back into the clearing after having run there from the river, gasping for breath. He tried to catch a fish, but hadn't succeeded, and now was paying the price of having overdone it. I'll definitely be more careful with my chakra when I get it back, if this is what it feels like to be a civilian. Lying down, Naruto took a moment to get his breath back, and took stock of his unearthly stamina that he had taken for granted. After a few minutes, Naruto had gotten his second wind, and was more careful with it now that he'd known what would happen if it was wasted like the first time. He took 2 of the kunai, pocketed them, adjusted them so that they wouldn't cut off his bits if he made the wrong move, and walked around the perimeter of the clearing, picking up stray twigs, even occasionally breaking some of the lower-hanging branches off of the trees. Soon, he had a good enough pile to start a small fire, for when it came time to do so, and placed them back near the backpack. He then started to dig a small pit in the middle of the clearing with one of the kunai, making a depression about a foot deep and 2 around. He lined the depression with rocks a little bigger than his fist, officially marking the depression as a fire pit. He stood up, stretching his back out to diffuse the pain of having been in a stooping position for just over an hour, when his stomach rumbled, loud and hard. Looking down in shock at the sound, Naruto suddenly realized just how hungry he was, and swore that he could feel his stomach shrink in on itself, and the empty pit that it left in his body because of that was most unsettling. Taking a look at the sun's position in the sky, he figured it was almost noon, and decided to try his hand at catching a fish. Standing at the edge of the river with a kunai in hand, he made the cross-shaped hand sign and made to pull on his chakra, only for nothing to happen. Oh right. No chakra, no jutsu. Naruto embarrassedly, and soberly thought, as he began to rethink his plan to catch lunch. And so, Naruto found himself standing in the middle of the river an hour later. A test of patience, something he'd quickly found himself lacking. And yet, as he stood there, he couldn't help but reach an almost zen-like state of mind, in doing so nearly missed the halibut that was swimming towards him. His arm went up. He struck. The fish scattered at the sudden intrusion, and the halibut was grazed by Naruto's fingers as they attempted to snatch it. Damn it! He muttered, as a hunger cramp struck. Now he had to wait another hour. His stomach loudly grumbled in protest. It was around 2 in the afternoon when Naruto finally caught several good-sized trout. He strung them up and brought them back to his camp, tired and hungry as hell, but smiling up a storm. Once he made it back to camp, he moved to simply set the string of fish down, before frowning. He didn't want to have to trek back to the river to clean up the fish before frying them, nor did he want to waste the water in his canteen. Looking around, he suddenly remembered one of the lessons they taught at the academy. Back before he'd taken the genin test the first time, there had been a wilderness survival class, and one of the things it taught was how to set your food so that forest predators couldn't get at it. Glancing at the trees around him, he found a branch about 15 feet up that looked strong enough for his needs. Tying the end of the rope to a kunai, Naruto tossed in the air, where it flew above the branch before coming down the other side. Jumping up and snagging the kunai out of the air, he started pulling on the rope, hoisting the fish string up about 10 feet before tying the end off at the base of the tree. Satisfied, Naruto gave himself a small nod of approval before setting about building the fire. Why on earth didn't they leave me a damn first aid kit? Naruto thought and grumbled angrily, digging through the pockets of the backpack with his left hand. He'd accidentally burned his right hand when the fire had suddenly picked right up, the flames hitting 3 of his fingers and the back of his hand, which was currently wrapped in the excess of his shirt. Finally, he found a small first aid kit in a side pocket, letting out a small aha of joy. He set about finding the burned cream. Once his hand had some cream on it, with a light wrapping of gauze to keep it from getting inflamed worse than it was, he lowered the fish, undid one of the 5-pounders he'd gotten, then raised the fish back up where he'd left them before beheading and skinning the one he'd taken down for lunch. Skewering the fish, he held it close to the fire to cook quickly, keeping a sharp eye on it. To Naruto, fish had never tasted so delicious. The rest of the day had been fairly slow, with Naruto resting up before eating dinner. He never knew just how much of a ninja's stamina came from their chakra, but that day was a startling reminder of just how big the difference between a civilian and a shinobi was. Naruto was humbled at how big a gap it was, and was thankful that the academy had also worked on physical development as well as chakra development. Otherwise he might have been screwed in setting up his encampment. Getting up, all his muscles started burning in pain, and the burn of his hand flared up. The combined pain nearly sent him into unconsciousness, but it wasn't as bad as the pain he'd had that morning. Thankfully, his body had gotten used to working without his chakra rather quickly, or else he'd still be in the fetal position moaning in pain. Stretching, Naruto stopped when it made the pain worse. Groaning, he shuffled over to the rope, letting the fish string down again as the sun went down. Picking the lone 7-pounder out of the 5 remaining fish, Naruto set it aside as he pulled the fish string back up the tree, feeling a twinge of pain each time his right hand took hold of the rope and pulled. After eating dinner, Naruto sat down, looking at the map of the elemental nations he'd been left. Noting his position, he figured that if he went east, he'd pass through the land of birds and enter the land of wind. Hopefully, he'd then find a Tsunade that was returning to Tsunade and follow them. From there, he'd locate Gaara and figure out his plan from there. Nodding to himself at the ingeniousness of it all, he put out the fire, letting the clearing only be lit by the low light of the moon, before laying his head upon the backpack and going to sleep. The wolves moved swiftly, the smell of rotting fish guiding them towards their destination. Nothing would stop them from getting their meal. Nothing. It was the howling that woke Naruto up. And it was the barking, the unstopping barking, that made him start to panic. Wolves? He had no chakra, so it was kinda pointless to scare them off. But if he could fight them, drive them away, then they wouldn't return, which was better than simply scaring them off. He sat up, pulling out a pair of kunai and holding them in a reverse grip in both hands. Let them come. I'll fight them off, he arrogantly thought. I hope. The howling and barking came closer and closer, the noises sounding more and more vicious and euphoric, and then they stopped. The silence filled the air, and all that could be heard was Naruto's heavy breathing. There was a slight shuffling sound as Naruto turned his head and torso around, trying to find where the wolves would first strike. He froze before twisting around, the kunai in his hand making a slight whistle in the air as he swung his arm around him, hitting nothing but air. His breathing became heavier, more ragged. If anyone could see him, they'd find his eyes darting around, his demeanor becoming frantic. And the wolf struck. Naruto was hit from the left, feeling teeth brush past his arm, hearing the snap the jaw made as it clamped shut, missing his arm by mere hairs. He twisted his arm to strike as the wolf's strike had knocked him to the ground, but was met with claws that held his arm down as Naruto felt hot breath descend upon his arm. Reacting the fastest he'd been since he'd woken up, Naruto slammed the butt of the kunai in his right hand into the face of the wolf that was about to devour his left arm. The wolf shrunk back from the blow, though not by much, but it had been enough for Naruto to pull his arm out from under the wolf's forepaws, garnering several gashes for his effort. He went up on one knee, panting from the effort, as the other wolves descended upon the encampment. Shit! Naruto ground out. The first attack set the mood for the entire affair. Naruto was blindsided by 2 as the rest ransacked the encampment, digging up the fish heads and skin he'd buried before ravaging them into nothing. Naruto swung, hitting home with the shoulder of one of the wolves, sending it limping back, and was immediately set upon by 2 more in its wake. They ripped into him, and he was barely able to hold his own. Every injury he made on them, they doubled on him, until he was bleeding and backed into the tree that held the string of fish. As the pack moved to finish Naruto off, he undid the knot keeping the fish string in the air, letting the half-dozen fall to the ground amidst the wolf pack, which quickly forgot about Naruto. He grabbed the backpack, which had a few holes in it but was pretty much intact along with everything in it, and crawled away. He crawled, and kept crawling until the wolf pack had become snarls in the distance, and then he collapsed on the ground, sobbing. He was well and truly alone here, with no help coming, and Konoha had left him here to die. He fell asleep crying, the snarling of the wolves becoming dimmer and dimmer as the night progressed. Naruto woke up in the middle of a forest, his face covered with dirt, dried blood and streaked with clear lines signifying the tracks his tears had taken to the ground. He sat up, and immediately began to regret it. All across his body were bruises from being thrown around, cuts where the wolves had latched onto him with the claws on their paws, and gashes from the few times that the beasts had bitten him. Reaching into the backpack, which he'd clearly taken as a makeshift pillow, if the dark spots where his eyes had been was any indication, Naruto pulled out the first aid kit. He began sloppily placing antiseptic on all the wounds, hissing at the pain of the sterilization, before applying healing cream and doing his best to cover the wounds with all of his bandages and gauze. Naruto missed the way he'd always healed fast, and immediately a glimpse of a memory, one where his Jonin-sensei had bandaged his hand after he'd stabbed his hand with a kunai to draw out the poison, flashed through his mind, and Naruto was crying once more, wishing for his life back. Wishing that he was back in Konoha, having lunch with Iruka while recounting his day of training and D-rank missions. Wishing that he was in the Hokage's office, being scolded by a drunken Tsunade for interrupting her while she was getting the day's filing done. But he couldn't be there. He wasn't there, because they'd banished him, and the tears flowed anew as Naruto laid on the ground, holding his knees close with his arms, and cried into them. "Excuse me, but could you please tell me where Uzumaki Naruto's room is? I stopped by the room he was in before, but it was empty." Iruka asked the receptionist at the desk. Even though he'd had to stay with Hinata for the past day, and even called upon her team and cousin to comfort the girl who'd been belittled by her soon-to-be ex-crush, Iruka would still visit Naruto, if only to remind himself of the boy he once knew, who had disappeared at the end of his last mission and left that thing behind. It hurt to think in those kinds of terms, to call Naruto a thing, but there was no other way to describe him. Iruka had extended the offer to join him in visiting Naruto, but all of his friends had declined. It appeared that they had been hurt by Naruto just like Hinata, and could not bring themselves to face him again. "Yes, he's been moved into permanent isolation in the South Ward. No visitors," the receptionist told the kind-hearted Chunin. "What? Why?" Iruka started to panic inside. What did that thing do? Was the painful thought going through his mind? Uzumaki had been attacking everyone he saw. One doctor even had to have surgery to reattach one of his fingers along with part of his hand. It was concluded that it was all the non-essential personnel he'd regularly come into contact with that was making him so dangerous, and the Godame herself approved his move into the isolation hall of the South Ward. The Godame herself approved this? If Iruka was shocked at the isolation, he was floored by the fact that Tsunade, who was practically a mother figure to Naruto, had condoned his isolation. Though perhaps it was because she's like his mother that she did this. All Iruka knew was that he now had to seek audience with the Godame, and find out if she put Naruto in isolation for his own safety, or for the safety of others. Naruto cried until he couldn't cry anymore. And then he simply lay there, feeling nothing but the slowly dimming pain of his wounds. One thought kept running through his mind, repeating itself like some kind of perverse mantra, never letting it get forgotten to something anything else. They left me. Konoha had abandoned him. His friends, the ones he'd alienated, had left him. He remembered everything. Every word, every action, everything. And he had no regrets about anything he said. No remorse, nothing. He tried to feel something for alienating his friends like that, but no matter what he did, he simply felt nothing. Naruto didn't notice when he'd fallen back asleep, nor did he stir when a shadow moved over his form. "Why did you lock up Naruto?" Iruka cut straight to the matter at hand. He knew that simply ignoring all pretenses would be immensely disrespectful, but there was a time and a place for such niceties, and this situation was neither the time nor the place. Not when it involved Naruto. He attacked anyone who he came into contact with, verbally and, when he could, physically. The sensible decision was to limit all contact with the outside world. Tsunade explained, and Iruka had the faintest of impressions that it was rehearsed, but tossed it aside as one of those things medical professionals do. "That's not what I meant, and you know it. It isn't that Iruka doesn't respect the position of Hokage or those that hold it, simply that his fondness for the lovable blonde went further than his sense of duty and honor." Tsunade sighs, as if she expected this, and he has to wonder if the Godame had expected something like this to happen. "Yumino, please call me Iruka, Lady Hokage." His curt interruption made for a split second of awkward silence before she continued as though there was not interruption at all. "Iruka," she began again, fixing him with a stern look. "I would not lock Naruto away if I didn't think it was just as much for his safety as the safety of the public. but in this case, they are one and the same. Naruto's become too dangerous to be around just anyone, and his behavior hasn't helped. If anything, it's made it all the more clear that he needs the isolation more than anything else. This gave Iruka pause, as he hadn't expected such an answer, but the idea seemed unbelievable in his mind. Naruto being locked up for his own sake as well as the sake of the villagers? Why, oh right, while the public that knew of Naruto's Jinchuriki status did not like him, nor did they act against him. Iruka heard that Naruto hadn't really been treated any better than the other orphans, but that didn't mean that he had been treated any worse than the others, and it was really only the parents fearing for their children's safety that they didn't let him play with others his age. The most they had done was treat him with indifference, to the point where it had appeared that everyone hated him. Iruka nodded. Do you visit him regularly? The question wasn't all that surprising to Tsunade, and she nodded, making sure he saw the nonverbal answer. Then if you could please tell him that I'm there for him, even if I can't be there in person. He sounded so desperate that she had no choice but to answer in the affirmative. In a side drawer of the Hokage's desk, there sat a necklace of a geometric jade cylinder with tiny bells on either side of it. It lay atop a worn-out hittite. Both were waiting for their wielder to return home. When Naruto woke up, the first thing he noticed was that he was in a large cave. The second thing he noticed was that he hadn't brought himself there. The third thing he noticed was that his wounds had been treated, and he was now in a fresh pair of clothes, identical to the previous pair. So you are awake then? It wasn't voiced as a question, and Naruto didn't think that the gruff voice had meant it to be one. He looked around before setting his eyes upon a small fire burning nearby. How had he not noticed it immediately? He was, like 3 feet from it, and the hunched form of a person on the opposite him. Yes. Naruto then clutched his throat. His voice had always been rather rough from having spent all that time yelling at anyone and everyone who would listen, but now it was different. A little deeper, only barely, he sadly noted, but definitely smoother now. Did you carry me here? His voice wasn't all that different, he noted. Fundamentally, he sounded the same, with the exception that it was as though he'd taken a cough drop. Not exactly, was all that the mysterious person replied, and Naruto waited several seconds in silence before realizing that the person wasn't going to say anything else. Naruto sat there in silence with the person, silently rejoicing in the company of another human being, before curiosity got the better of him, making him fidget until he worked up the courage to speak again. Thanks for saving me, I guess. Boy, this was awkward, Naruto thought, as he tried to thank the man. My name's Naruto, by the way. The man shuffled into the light of the fire better, and Naruto's breath caught as he was met with the sight of a cloak. The black cloak, dotted with red clouds. The man set his dead eyes on Naruto, his dark, wood-like skin reflecting slightly in the glow of the fire. My name is Akatsuki no Sasori, Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Naruto quickly took hold of the situation, moving to grab his backpack, which he immediately shouldered and ran for the mouth of the cave, only to be stopped by a giant, segmented chain-like thing that, Naruto saw with growing horror, had come from the Akatsuki member himself. Now where are you going so fast, Jinchuriki? Sasori spoke. It is quite rude for one to give their full name, and another to simply avoid such niceties. So, if you would please tell me your full name. Uzumaki Naruto, former genin of Konohagakure. He couldn't do anything. He had no chakra, all the kunai were in the backpack, if Sasori hadn't already noticed and removed them. But he'd be damned if he didn't put up a fight, no matter how pointless it would be. It seems you misunderstand, that title was not the one I wanted to hear. Tell me what you really are before I contact my partner to kill you. Sasori's face didn't so much as bat an eye when Naruto had begun to slip into a basic taijutsu stance. Naruto's throat felt dry at the reminder that there was a second S-class ninja close by, prepared for his escape. He gulped his spit, trying to wet his throat to be able to talk, and began to speak, his usual cocky tone non-existent. Uzumaki Naruto, Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the nine-tailed demon fox. He sounded so scared. Sasori chuckled, a grating sound that was not dissimilar to the noise that one makes when they drag a piece of metal across concrete. Good, he said. I just wanted you to confirm it yourself before I took you down. After all, leader would be very unhappy if I brought in the wrong person. And Naruto took it as the best time to make his move. He knew that attaining the mark of S-class meant that you were one of a select few who were the deadliest in all of the elemental nations, that you could take on anyone and come out on top. The only ones that could ostensibly take on an S-class ninja was another S-class ninja or a Kage, and even then it was unknown just who would win. Naruto was neither S-class caliber nor a Kage, nor did he have any chakra to call upon. But that didn't mean that he wasn't gonna go down fighting. Naruto flew forward, sliding across the clacking tail thing that had moved to intercept him, ducked down as a hail of saban were shot out of Sasori's mouth, obliterating the cloth that hid it from view. Naruto thought that he'd seen some pretty freaked out things in his short time as a ninja, from Orochimaru shedding his skin to Kabuto coming back to life after having his guts turned to dust by Naruto's own hand, but they couldn't really compare to Sasori, as he found out. Sasori's left hand shot out, the blunt wooden hand thing slamming into Naruto, who was propelled further by the sudden explosion of the fingers, launching him into the side of the cave and cracking his already bruised ribs. Naruto got up, clutching his side and coughing up blood. He reached into the backpack, and was overjoyed at finding the kunai where he'd left them. Thank God for small mercies. Holding two between his knuckles like claws, he staggered forward towards Sasori, deflecting the tip of the tail, causing the rest of it to follow as it stuck itself in the ground to the side of Naruto. Sasori tried to yank the tail back towards him, but it didn't respond. Looking at it, he was angered to find that it had been taken down by a single kunai that had been jammed into the mechanism near the body. He growled and removed the Akatsuki cloak, revealing the true form of his outer shell to Naruto, who was much too close for comfort. Sending out chakra strings, he'd been momentarily shocked to find that they hadn't taken hold, as if the Kyuubi Jinchuriki had no chakra. That moment had been all Naruto had needed to slam the remaining kunai in his hand as deep into what he thought had been Sasori's head, and then the chakra strings had taken hold, and Naruto was flung back. Hey, guess you Akatsuki dudes aren't as powerful as you think you are. He smiled and stood up, before grimacing and clutching at his now broken ribs in pain. Damn. The voice made Naruto stop, his eyes wide with fear. He turned towards the dead Sasori, only to watch in horror as a red-headed teen stood up, standing in what Naruto now knew was nothing more than a shell of some kind. You took down Iruka. I should be impressed by your skill if I didn't know for a fact that you were about to die. The voice was impossibly smoother, but Naruto couldn't mistake it for anyone else. The person standing before him was Akasuna no Sasori, alive, uninjured and quite unhappy. What are you? Naruto was frozen in fear. I already told you. I am Akasuna no Sasori, the greatest puppet master since Chikamatsu Manzaman. Sasori looked at Naruto. Tell me, did you really believe to have killed me? Naruto said nothing, as fear dominated his body. He was so scared. And he was about to die. He felt some kind of pressure come from inside of his body, pushing against some kind of barrier, and for a second Naruto was scared that it was Kyuubi, using this as the perfect time to turn him back into that bastard white person again. But then he realized that if it really was Kyuubi, then it would feel like a fire, comforting and burning his body simultaneously. This instead felt warm and comforting, like it was something that he'd always had with him, bringing him comforting warmth in the coldest of nights, and cooling him down on the hottest of days. Naruto let it come forth. There was what felt like some sort of wall crumbling, and the barrier shattered. The seal had broken. Naruto's chakra had returned to him, and with it, his unwavering confidence. For a second there, yeah, I kinda did. Naruto's trademark smirk was back in place, and he flexed his fingers, feeling his chakra flow throughout his entire body and fill it with the life he hadn't noticed was missing. But now I'm gonna make sure that you're dead as dust when I'm through with you. And how do you propose to do that? Sasori was reaching into his cloak and removing a scroll from it. After all, you have shown that your skills are not worthy of combating my favorite puppet, and you appear to have had your chakra sealed. Don't underestimate me. Naruto growled, a bit of his old scruffy voice showing through with that single comment. He moved his hands into the familiar cross-shaped hand sign, and brought forth just enough chakra for a half-dozen clones. Normally, he'd call forth an army, but the loss of his chakra had left a lasting impact on him, making him more conservative in terms of chakra usage. A half-dozen shadow clones popped into existence, dividing into groups of two. One from each pair held their right hand out to the side, while the remaining three started moving their hands, aiding in the creation of three individual Rasengan. Sasori simply stared, his eyes half-lidded. He cocked his head slightly, letting his interest in the mechanics of such a jutsu show on his, albeit, emotionless face. An interesting jutsu, but not one that will help you against me. Sasori summoned several puppets and sent them after all the 6 identical blonde teens rushing towards him. The 3 without Rasengans were taken out quite easily, and disappeared in bursts of smoke, but the remaining 3 were able to dispatch of 3 puppets before being taken down with non-fatal wounds meant to incapacitate, as Sasori believed that the real one was among them. And then all 3 dispersed into smoke, and Sasori was left in the cave with nothing to show for his attempt at capturing a Jinchuriki except for 4 damaged puppets and a broken ego. Deidara wasn't gonna drop this failure anytime soon. If Sasori was still human, his one eye would be twitching like mad. Naruto ran, and kept running, west. He didn't stop for several hours, and when he did, it was nearing dusk, and he'd come upon a small town. Panting, and, he was very glad to note, only slightly winded, he went to the nearest house and knocked on the door. The last thing he saw before passing out from his injuries was the face of a red-headed girl a little older than him. When Naruto next woke up, he was shirtless and had a doctor checking over his once broken ribs. Hirako Shinji, as the doctor was called, was quite odd-looking, in Naruto's opinion. He had teal hair and a bowl cut, and his face reminded Naruto of a goat, for some reason. Well, I don't know how, but you're almost completely healed, Shinji said as he got up. Looking down at Naruto, Shinji left him with these parting words. At the rate you're healing, you're free to be on your way by this afternoon. Wait! Naruto called out, still tired from all he'd been through. How long have I been out? All night. You're really very lucky you knocked on Lisa's door. If it had been my house you'd probably still be laying out there. Shinji chuckled to himself as he left the room, leaving Naruto with more questions than answers. Who's Lisa? Yadamara Lisa, It turned out was the red-headed girl he'd seen just before collapsing. She had short hair, which she'd apparently just dyed red when Naruto had appeared on her doorstep, and wore wire-framed glasses over violet-gray eyes. She was quite uptight, as Naruto soon found out when he thanked her for taking him in and calling Shinji. "I was simply doing what was needed of me. Now get healing and remove yourself from my life once you're done," was her response. He'd laughed, and then offered to help her however he could. She'd kicked him in the face. The day had come and gone quickly, and Naruto had decided to leave in the morning. He and Lisa had gone over to Shinji's house for dinner, sashimi and rice, which Naruto took to like it was the most delicious thing in the world, confusing Shinji, Lisa and Shinji's daughter, a spunky blonde much like Naruto named Hiyori. They'd had lots of fun, talking about anything and everything, from Shinji explaining the more hilarious exploits of Hiyori trying to attack him whenever he came home to Naruto's prankster exploits back in Konoha. He was surprised to find that, while there was a part of his heart ached when he started talking about the village that had abandoned him, it wasn't as much as it when he'd crawled away from the wolves. The sun lazily appeared in the sky, and it came time for Naruto to be on his way. Lisa, Shinji, Hiyori appeared to see him off, wishing him the best of luck in his journey. "Here." Shinji held out a pouch. "What is it?" Naruto asked as he took the pouch and affixed it upon the waist of his pants. "It's the basic medkit that all medic nin have with them. Since the land of birds doesn't have a ninja village to call its own, the villagers have to make do themselves, and prefer not to call upon the aid of the ninja of Suna and Konoha whenever they can. This means that we have to be as self-sufficient as possible, and you'd be surprised at how important these things can be to us, especially in times of war," Shinji explained, and Naruto nodded his head, the patience he'd gained from catching fish by hand making him better at listening to others. Hiyori gave Naruto enough jerky to survive a round-trip trek from Kumo to Suna, and Lisa gave him a book on the elemental nations, which surprised him. He hadn't thought that they really hit it off during his stay there, but he'd been wrong. "Thanks guys for everything." He just wasn't sure how to properly express his happiness towards them, and Shinji seemed to notice it. Giving Naruto another of his odd smiles, "He looks like a goat so much it's not funny," they bade Naruto a safe journey to Tsunade. Contrary to popular belief, the Land of Wind was not, in fact, one big desert, as a rather idiotic person said it was. That person also said such idiotic comments like there being no land routes anywhere in the Land of Water, the lands of lightning and earth being entirely made of mountains, and the Land of Fire being a thick forest. That person, Jiraiya of the Sannin, had lived to regret his idiocy in the many years since having answered that question in his academy days. For instance, he hadn't really bothered to learn about the smaller countries, the ones without hidden villages. Foregoing such knowledge, he'd instead prefer to have his contacts, the real spies among his network, deal with those kinds of things, and instead wanted regular information on the 5 hidden villages, including the 3, now 4, lesser villages, Kusa, Taki, Aim and Oto. And it was for that reason the Uzumaki Naruto disappeared off the face of the earth, and he now had to figure out just what to say to Tsunade, who had asked him to provide her with regular updates on how Naruto was faring out in the world. He thought that it would be rather easy. The Gaki, having been left near an often-used trade route, would hitch a ride to the nearest town, where Jiraiya was waiting in disguise and would watch Naruto's actions, indirectly interfering if the situation called for it. But then 2 days had passed, and several caravans had come and gone via the route, and none of them had Naruto with them, or reported seeing a small blonde-haired boy with whisker birthmarks. At the end of the second day, Jiraiya had to exercise self-restraint in going to make sure Naruto was okay, instead sending one of his messenger toads to spy on Naruto, and thinking that there wasn't that big of a difference between a civilian and a genin, stamina-wise. Oh, if he only knew. "What do you mean you can't find him?" Tsunade's angry, strained voice hits him almost as bad as one of her punches, and he flinches back as though she had hit him. "I mean, he wasn't found by any of the caravans, and when I went to see where he'd been left, it was home to a wolf pack." Tsunade looked tired, and stressed beyond belief. There were obvious signs that he'd stayed there. In the middle of the clearing was a fire pit, and the wolves appeared to have dug up the remains of several fish. Looked like the Gaki had gone fishing, by hand probably, and the smell of the fish attracted the wolves. "I tried to find him, but there wasn't anything that could be tracked. The toads can't track by scent, he's left nothing to indicate where he's gone, and having his chakra sealed makes it impossible to find him through that means. I hate to say it, but it appears that the Gaki has gone off the grid, however intentional or not it was." Tsunade got out of her seat, went around the desk and clutched Jiraiya's vest in both hands, lifting him off of the ground. "Then find him. I want to know everything, where he is, what he's doing, who he's with. Everything," she growled, her eyes red with tears unshed. The sun beat down hard upon Naruto, and he looked around him, finding that it was only slightly cooler in the shadow of the patch of forest he was in. Pulling out the map, he looked over it, judging how far he'd traveled in the past week. It had been a week since he'd left the small town of Karakura in the Land of Birds, and since then he'd been running nonstop, using the sun's location to head in the right direction. He hoped. Looking down at the map of the Land of Wind, he found that he should have reached Tsunade by now, given its location relative to Karakura. Back when he'd first entered the Land of Wind, he'd gone through an odd border town, the kind where you would expect the most unsavory of characters to use to cross borders undetected. In fact, he'd been checked through by a strange man, rather tall and slender. Odoribishi Rojuro, or Rose, had wavy blonde hair similar in color to Naruto's, which brought out the purple in his eyes. Naruto was slightly freaked out to have noticed, "Does this mean I'm gay?" While Rose had simply smiled and said that he had an appearance that made all people question their sexuality. How'd he know what I was thinking? Before sending Naruto on his way to verify his newly minted passport with, Naruto looked at the note he was given Urahara Kisuke. Urahara made Rose seem normal, Naruto idly noted, as his mind had all but shut down once he'd met the guy in charge of verifying passports. He wore a dark green shirt with matching shorts, a green and white bucket hat over his short pale blonde hair, geta, and a black coat with a white diamond pattern on the bottom. However, that was probably the most normal thing about him. He carried around a cane for no reason that Naruto could see, as he darted about his office without so much as a hint of a limp, and kept asking Naruto the oddest of questions. What's your favorite day of the week? Do you prefer dogs or cats? What word do you think is the funniest to say? What's your favorite hour of the day? And didn't really give Naruto a chance to answer any of them. And if that didn't cement that this Urahara guy was insane, then the fact that he'd introduced Naruto to his best friend, a black cat, sent him over the top, in Naruto's opinion. The second Naruto had his passport stamped and approved, he shouldered his pack, made sure he had everything he needed on him, and started running the second he had a good hold on the passport. He hadn't really stopped running since, and now he was lost. Great, he thought. Now what am I gonna do? Gaara had been sent to perform a once-over of the forest outside of Suna, and hadn't expected to find anything. If he was to be completely honest, which, he figured he was, with anyone who asked, he would answer that he rather liked border patrol. The quiet was a big difference in comparison to the people all muttering about him. He'd never really liked being around other people, as it had made the crazed mutterings of the tanuki within him turn into blood-crazed screams to kill them all. And so Baki, as acting Kazekage until either a proper one could be found or the council voted him the go dame, sent Gaara on city border patrol. So far, he hadn't run into anybody, and was descending into a state of mind he had never been in. Is this what they mean when they say that they feel zen? Were some of the thoughts that ran through his mind as he considered the oddity that was this calm. Even the tanuki was being rather silent, which would normally have made him freak out, but the zen mind he believed himself to be in made him simply choose to enjoy it. A look of peace adorned Gaara's face as he slowly walked along the ground, under the shade of the forest. And then someone nearby started cursing, and Gaara's moment of zen was gone. Naruto looked at the map, and by his calculations, he should be in the middle of Suna. Damn it! He cried out, before turning that single sentence into a mantra. The mantra continued until he was picked up and thrown into a tree. Sand curled around him, pinning him to the tree, and would have crushed him had he not realized just who had found him. Who are you and why have you interrupted my zen? Gaara sounded somewhat unsure about it actually being zen, and his uncertainty showed. Gaara? Naruto appeared jubilant, before what Gaara said sank in. He quirked an eyebrow and said, quite disbelievingly, did you say zen, Uzumaki? Gaara regarded, and the sand returned to his gourd. To answer your question, I was feeling exceedingly peaceful, I think, is the correct term for it, before you made your presence known. Now tell me, why are you here? Naruto paused, trying to find the logic in Gaara being zen, failing, and finally answering by handing Gaara the scroll written by Tsunade. Gaara stared at the scroll, before Naruto prompted him to open and read it. His eyes narrowed, and Naruto had to physically stop him from going to the acting Kazekage and requesting that he be sent back to Konoha. Gaara simply responded that it was rather stupid to have banished their strongest ninja, to which Naruto sighed and explained just where he ranked in power. Gaara had appeared confused, at least Naruto hoped that it was confused on his face, and not him about to go bats hit again. He almost said as much, but decided not to. Sometimes it was better not to say anything than be completely open and honest with someone, especially when that someone could kill you into dust, literally, without batting an eye. He sighed. This is going to be a long day. Jiraiya stood at the passport verification process in Karakura, dodging all sorts of strange questions from the pale blonde man in front of him. At first, he'd simply been trying to get his passport stamped so he could enter the country, but he'd hit a bit of a snag with the crazy pale blonde-haired man in front of him. After answering all the questions he could, he was about to get his passport stamped when the man had made the connection that he wrote the Ika Ika series. The man then went and announced it on the PA system. Apparently, a lot of the people there were big fans, and bullied him into autographing anything and everything that they could get signed. And he meant everything. He shuddered. Sometimes, he hated being the writer of a famed series. Hey Gaara, could you not tell anyone I'm here? Naruto's smooth voice cut through the air as he and Gaara walked back to Suna. Why? Because I'm not sure if Konoha has warned the Kazekage about me. Gaara looked at Naruto. I am sure that whatever you did was not so bad that the entire elemental nations would be after you. Gaara's reply was swift and filled with somewhat flawed logic. I know, but have you ever heard of the Akatsuki? Naruto stopped with Gaara and looked at his auburn-haired friend. I have not. Well, they're this group of S-class ninja, and they're after us. Gaara's head tilted slightly. Us? What we hold? Naruto could not have been clearer. I was not under the impression that we held anything. Naruto's eyes started twitching. Has he never heard of subtle? And then he remembered who he was talking to, and sighed. You have the Ichibi no Shikaka sealed within you. I have the Kyuubi no Kitsune sealed within me. Gaara's eyes widened, and something akin to panic spread throughout his entire being. The tanuki inside him had gone deathly silent, and this time Gaara didn't know if it was good or bad that such a thing had happened. And the Akatsuki want to take them from us. That does not sound good. Gaara stated in his usual blunt demeanor. And you are sure that they are after us? Positive. Naruto confirmed with a grim look upon his face. I got abducted by one of them back in the land of birds. His name was what was it? It was like a kind of insect Sasori. That was his name. Akasuna no Sasori. I have heard that name before. Kankuro has expressly stated that this Sasori is the greatest puppet master to have ever existed, and hopes to one day surpass him in the puppet arts. Gaara responds. I assume that there are others in this Akatsuki? Yeah, at least 2 others, a tall fishman from Kiri. Kisame, I think his name is. And Uchiha Itachi, Sasuke's older brother. Naruto answers, then looks at Gaara. You said your brother knows this Sasori? Think he can tell us? Gaara paused, and then continued back to Suna, Naruto following behind him. As you have stated, I have people who wish to protect me, and since our battle I have been trying to make it up to them, I believe is the phrase. Gaara took a second to find the right words to best explain to the upbeat wait. Gaara made the sudden realization that Uzumaki Naruto was not the same person he had fought months ago. Thinking over previous encounters with Uzumaki, Gaara had come to know the blonde as loud, brash, open and prone to acting before thinking. Now, however, the Uzumaki Naruto he had been talking to was almost counterpoint to the Uzumaki he knew, calm, quieter, closed off, though not too much, and appeared to be thinking before acting. Naruto looked at Gaara, trying to get the attention of the, hopefully, reformed psychopath in the best way that wouldn't end with his life in danger. In short, he was asking Gaara why he'd stopped walking and was just staring out into space. Gaara snapped back to reality and chose to ignore Naruto's incessant questioning of what he'd been thinking of, instead continuing to Suna. Naruto figured that it wasn't something he should know and followed along. Jiraiya wasn't sure if it was fate of the good kind or fate of the bad kind that had him watching as every single one of his fans in Karakura told him of their own attempts to recreate the sex scenes in his books, complete with visual aids and everything. Maybe there was something to be said for rabid fans, Jiraiya noted as he watched on, listening to various people comment on their own personal variations, like Ikamaru Jin and his lover Matsumoto Ranjaku attempting the legendary scene from Ika Ika Violence. Granted, he was strapped to a chair with no hope of escape, but still, maybe there was something to this whole roleplay thing. Entering Suna was simple. Naruto and Gaara had approached the gauntlet that was the only entrance in and out. The guards had been apprehensive until Gaara had given them his death glare and said that Naruto was with him. Needless to say, they'd let the pair through, and now Gaara had to endure Naruto berating him for acting so harshly. I'm just saying, had you been a little nicer, he'd checked my papers and we would have been free to do what we wanted here. Not on our way to the Kazekage's office to make sure the guy knows I'm here. Naruto rolled his eyes. Besides, why'd you want to let him know anyway? It would be idiotic to not let him know you are here, and I see no reason not to inform him. Gaara was stopped by Naruto gripping his shoulders briefly before pulling back as the sand beneath his feet started encompassing his legs. Gaara, Naruto began, serious face in place. I don't want anyone knowing I'm here. Barely anybody knew I was in the woods on the edge of the land of birds, and yet Akatsuki found me. I don't want to bring them here. To you, I can take care of myself. Gaara replied, and made the sand recede from Naruto's legs. Can you really hold your own against a group of people so powerful that just one of them alone can meet one of the Kage on equal grounds? 'Cause I was lucky in being able to escape, and don't think I'll be capable of taking any of them on anytime soon. Naruto responded, looking at the back of his friend as Gaara walked through the gauntlet towards Suna. And I was able to meet you on equal ground, Gaara. As we're only Chunin level at best, and not even the most skilled of Chunin can take on a Kage and hope to win. That got Gaara's attention, as he stopped and looked back at Naruto. Then what do you propose we do? Naruto shook his head, and quietly answered, I honestly don't know. Do what we can and train. Become stronger so that we can at least go down fighting, I guess. The two looked at each other, gauging their options, when Gaara suddenly turned and started walking again. If we are to defend ourselves, then we must know as much as we can about our enemy. Gaara spoke. Come. We shall seek out Kankuro and learn all about this Akasuna no Sasori. Tsunade wasn't all that different from Konoha, Naruto noticed, as he walked down the street towards the housing where Gaara and his siblings were staying at. The wary glances, looks of fear and anger were also all too familiar to Naruto, and he felt that he could sympathize with Gaara somewhat. Granted, all he had going for himself was being treated with total apathy, but he could definitely remember the people looking at him in fear and hatred when they thought he wasn't looking, whispering vile things about him when they thought he couldn't hear. Gaara, meanwhile, had to murder his uncle, who had wormed his way into his heart and then ripped it out before having to fend off the countless assassination attempts made by his own father. And it was in that moment that Naruto reached an understanding of Gaara nobody else could ever hope to achieve. Gaara had been forced to become the tool his father had wanted of him, and in doing so almost lost his mind. Almost lost his humanity. Looking around, Naruto saw the truth of Tsunade. He saw things that he'd seen in the Land of Waves shops with little to sell, people out on the street begging for food, money, safe housing. He saw the empty shops, the high prices, the look of desperation in the eyes of everyone in sight, even the ninja, and it was then that he truly knew just how vastly different each of the hidden villages were. Back when he was young and just learning about the many hidden villages, he'd thought that all of them were just as big and bustling as Konoha. Oh, how wrong he'd been. Tsunade clearly wasn't as bustling as Konoha, and given that they'd only been walking for not even 5 minutes, and were already at the Kazekage's mansion in the middle of the village, Tsunade wasn't nearly as large as Konoha. Gaara led Naruto inside, and went directly towards the living quarters. You live here? Naruto was in awe. He'd never been in the part of the Hokage's residence that they'd actually lived it, but he never thought in his wildest dreams that they'd live so luxuriously. Yes, was Gaara's succinct answer. Kankuro's room resides down this way, and he can usually be found in there improving his puppets. Naruto almost wanted to ask how Gaara knew that, but decided once again that there were some things about Gaara that he'll never understand. They approached the simple door, white against the beige walls, and knocked. Kankuro appeared to almost have a heart attack when he opened his door and saw Gaara standing there with the blonde Konohanin who'd defeated Gaara. May we come in? Gaara politely asked. And that was another thing that had been changed about Gaara. He was using manners, asking if something he was about to do was okay, or wanting to know their opinion on something that seemed entirely trivial to anyone else. Kankuro and Temari weren't sure if he was trying to be nicer or if he was simply acting that way just to see them freak out. Yes. Kankuro certainly wasn't about to deny Gaara something he clearly wanted to do or know. He stepped back and let the duo in. Kankuro's room was almost exactly like Naruto imagined it to be. There was a bed in the far corner, and to the side of it was a bookshelf filled with various scrolls. Probably on puppetry, Naruto thought. On the wall opposite of the bed, there was a dresser with a vanity mirror atop it, and Naruto had to prevent himself from bursting out laughing at the array of makeup products lying out atop it. Scattered on the floor were various gears and puppet parts. Looks like Gaara was right. Naruto noted. Look, we need to keep this whole visit thing quiet, and the both of us would really appreciate it if you didn't tell anyone that we were here. Naruto spoke for the first time since commenting on the grand scale of the mansion, and his comment was driven home by the dark look Gaara was giving Kankuro, who nodded. So, what do you know about Akasuna no Sasori? Sasori was the greatest puppet master to ever exist after the creator of the puppet techniques, Chikamatsu Manzaemon. He was the first person capable of controlling more than 10 puppets at a single time, though he never told anyone just how he did it, and was made famous for using 100 puppets to obliterate a single fortress during a raid several years before the Sandaime Kazekage went missing and the Third Great Shinobi World War began. Kankuro explained. Outside of the fact that he's the only known user of human puppets, no one knows what else he can do. Human puppets? Naruto asked. It's said that Sasori was the first person to ever use living humans as puppets, and there are rumors that he'd been taking the bodies of people he'd defeated and turning them into actual puppets, though there is no proof to either of those claims. So the only people who could definitively say such a thing are the two elders Chiyo and Abizu, and Sasori himself. Is it possible to meet with either of those elders? Gaara inquired, and Kankuro shrugged. I highly doubt it. Word is, both of them went crazy years ago, and spend all their time playing pranks on anyone they come across, even themselves. Kankuro said. And even then, I don't think you can get anything out of them. After all, Sasori is the grandson of Chiyo, and she gets pretty tight-lipped when someone mentions him. So that's it then? Naruto asks, looking at Kankuro with some measure of disappointment. He can control 100 puppets, human puppets, at any one time. He sighed, shoulders slumping before realizing something. What's so important about human puppets? Aren't they the same as regular puppets? Kankuro rolled his eyes before replying, no, that's where everybody was wrong. By using actual human bodies as puppets, Sasori theorized that it was possible to use the chakra nature that person had been able to use in real life. He even suggested that it was possible to use the Kekkai Genkai that a puppet could use when they were alive. But neither of those had ever really been verified, as the public thought that the rumors of Sasori's puppets being made from the bodies of real people disgusting. That's really all I know, thanks, Kankuro. Naruto said somewhat more upbeat, and like his old self in this environment. But there's one thing I don't understand. What's chakra nature? Don't they teach you anything in Konoha? Kankuro muttered before responding. You know how people can use elemental ninjutsu, right? At Naruto's nod he continued. Well, the reason people can do that is because their chakra coils naturally lean towards one of the 5 elements: fire, wind, water, lightning and earth. Elemental Kekkai Genkai don't fit under any of these categories, but the 2 elements that make them do. For example, your Shodai Hokage could use wood release, but that isn't one of the 5 elements. However, the 2 elements that combine to create it, earth and water, are 2 of the 5 elements. With me so far? Yeah. Naruto said, though it left him with a few questions. He knew that only someone from Konoha would be able to answer them. Thanks for explaining. We'll be on our way, and remember, we were never here. That last part was hissed with Naruto putting on his serious face again before going back to his upbeat and cheerful self and leaving with Gaara. The door closed, and Kankuro was left alone. He collapsed, shaking in fear, drenched in sweat and on the verge of hyperventilating. What the hell? The view from atop the canyon made for an amazing sight as the sun set on the horizon. Soon it looked like it was built of gold, shimmering in the last dregs of sunlight, as Naruto watched on with Gaara. So, where are you going to go? Naruto looked at Gaara in surprise, having thought that Gaara wasn't one to lead a conversation. I dunno. North, I guess, head into the land of Earth. Might stay there for a while, probably head into IWA. See if the ninja are anything like Konoha says they are. Naruto replied, turning back to watch the sunset. And what will you do if you come across Akatsuki? Neither of them were looking at each other, for fear of seeing their friend for what may be the last time. I'll put up one hell of a fight, but I doubt I'll be able to get away from them a third time. The first was cause of Jiraiya and Sasuke showing up, while the second was luck, pure and simple. Naruto answered. And you damn well better put up a really good fight, or I'll kick your ass when we meet again. Naruto laughed again, but it simply served to increase the awkward. What if I went with you? Gaara had single-handedly taken the entire conversation and obliterated any of the tension. No. I won't let you ruin the bonds. Naruto was cut off. I have tried, but there are no bonds with either of my siblings, and what I have with you is much stronger than my bond to them. Gaara tersely stated. And no matter how much you may wish it, there is nothing I have not done to fix it. There is nothing keeping me here, and together we may be enough to fend off the Akatsuki. Naruto was silent, considering the options. Gaara was right. Alone they couldn't face the Akatsuki on equal footing. And it was safe enough to assume that the other Jinchuriki wouldn't be able to fight the Akatsuki off by themselves, no matter how powerful they were. Even if they were S-class, it would only mean that they could fight on equal footing with one of the Akatsuki, and it would mean that they wouldn't win against two of the missing nin in the organization. Presumably, they were put in pairs to complement each other's abilities, meaning that they were doubly strong together, and were specially suited to take down any one of the Jinchuriki. Going by that logic, then it would mean that they would have a harder time taking down at least two Jinchuriki at the same time. Which left Naruto with a single goal to do, in order to protect the world as well as ensure that he and his ilk lived as long as possible. Then we'll head north to the land of Earth together, Naruto said with conviction, standing up and turning away from the city. Gaara was surprised at the ease in which Naruto had accepted that they were traveling together, and stood up, unfastening his Tsunade from the shoulder strap of his gourd. What will we do? Naruto turned back to look at Gaara, pure determination on his face as grim resolve set in. We'll get the other Jinchuriki to side with us. We'll fight the Akatsuki, together. And with that said, the two started north to Earth Country, Gaara's Hittite quickly becoming buried underneath the sand of the desert. Behind them the sun set, leaving everything in the pitch black of the night. It was the border between the land of rain and the land of wind, and they had been traveling for quite some time. They'd moved through the night, and well into the day, until it was dusk and they'd reached the border town. The town itself was rather unassuming, almost blending into mountainous landscape, and the duo would have passed by it completely if they hadn't crossed paths with a merchant entering the land of wind. Shiba Kakaku had been rather loud in pointing the way, her prosthetic arm having been remarkably responsive, despite simply being a plain old wooden arm. Maybe it's like that puppet body thing that Sasori used. Shaking that thought for another time, Naruto thanked the outgoing fireworks vendor before heading with Gaara into town. The trip had been a rather silent one for Naruto and Gaara, as Gaara had never been one for conversation, and Naruto had gone deep in thought. While he may not have been the best at book smarts, he prided himself on his observational skill. And that skill told him everything about Gaara's reasons for going with him. Gaara considered him important enough that he couldn't handle losing. More than his siblings, at least Naruto thought, as he approached the first motel he saw, only to realize he had no money. Looking at Gaara, Naruto could instantly tell that he wasn't one to keep any money on hand, and so, they found themselves camping out in the forest surrounding the small town of Hanakari, eating more of the jerky he'd been given from Hiyori a little over a week ago. Say what you will about the angry blonde girl, she made darn good jerky. You never really told me why you came with me. Naruto opened, looking at the fire in front of him. Why do flames interest me so? Naruto silently hoped he wasn't some kinda crazed pyro, then remembered his first C-rank mission, and the extremely flashy entrance he'd made at the final battle on the bridge. Damn it, I'm a pyro. He was so caught up in his thoughts that he almost missed the response Gaara gave him. I already told you, there was nothing keeping me in that village. Gaara's response unnerved Naruto. Nothing? Not even your brother and sister? Naruto looked over at the redhead, who was mechanically chewing on the jerky, and almost wished he knew what was running through the former psychopath's mind. Almost. I had reached out to them as many times as I could, but they refused me. Gaara bluntly stated, and Naruto could detect a hint of something in Gaara's voice. Disappointment? Well, what did you do? Naruto shifted into a better position, leaning against a nearby tree, elm, he noted. I did many things. Asking for their opinions on anything I deemed unimport, thanking them for being there, and yet no matter what I did, they appeared to be even more scared of me. Maybe it wasn't what you did, but how you did it? Naruto sagely answered, complete with faking the teacher pose. Gaara simply stared on, not getting the gist of the joke. Naruto got out of the teacher pose and sighed, muttering about crazy redheads who wouldn't know comedy if it flew out of their asses. Needless to say, Gaara was confused. I do not believe it was my actions, as I am positive that they were quite clear. Naruto leaned forward, but Gaara didn't elaborate, leaving Naruto momentarily slump his shoulders in defeat before jumping on Gaara's lack of faith. So that's it then? You just tried your best, and when you didn't get the reactions you wanted, you up and left the first chance you got, is that it? Naruto was angry, no scratch that. He was pissed. How could someone care so little for the faith of others in such a way? What do you expect me to do, Uzumaki? Go back to that place, and do as you do? Grin at them, smile when they glare, laugh at them while they scorn me? Naruto, shocked out of his anger, looked away at that. Even you cannot admit that it would be wise to do so. So, then what else am I to do except to go with you, the only other person I have met who can understand me? Gaara, Naruto looked at him, and it appeared as though the weight of the world was slowly resting upon his shoulders. I won't try to force you to go somewhere you hate, but that doesn't mean I'll always be there for you to follow. In fact, first chance I get, I'm sending you back there and I'll be right beside you, making sure that you build the proper bonds with your brother and sister, even if I have to kick your ass to get you there. Uzumaki, I do not believe that I will ever understand you. Gaara stated. No one really can say they understand me, but feel free to try. Naruto lay down and rolled over, waving a hand in Gaara's direction. Night. Soon thereafter, soft snoring could be heard coming from Naruto, while Gaara simply leaned back against the tree behind him, next to his gourd, his sand contorting into the curve of his back. He lay there comfortably and watched Naruto sleep, the fire slowly burning itself out. Back in Konoha, the remaining teams had practically disbanded. Kakashi had gone back into ANBU, and nobody had seen him since. Sakura had joined the vacant space in Team 10 left by Shikamaru's promotion to Chunin, training with Ino and working together to take the next Chunin exams and get promoted to Chunin. Asuma and Kurenai had chosen to simply let their relationship become public, which had caused Shirani Ginma to win the betting pool on when they take the plunge. The pool was updated yearly, with the pot compounded as the new bets were placed. Now the betting pool was on when Asuma would knock up Kurenai. Shikamaru worked on learning more of his clan's techniques, even creating a few of his own. Kiba was working on improving his dual piercing fang, not wanting to have another mission end like the failed Sasuke retrieval mission. Shino had gone deep into clan training with his Kikeichu, now quite open about his jealousy at Kiba having gone on the mission instead of him. Niji had worked with Hinata, helping her to move past Naruto, but try as he might, she couldn't completely move past it. Both Hyuga worked to improve their proficiency in the gentle fist. Guy and Lee were more exuberant than ever, working to become stronger than they were before, while Tenten had gone to Kurenai for help train in Genjutsu. Choji had become much more outgoing with mentioning his weight, and had gone on to become much stronger than he had before. One thing was taboo for them all, Uzumaki Naruto. While they trained and acted like they'd gotten past it, they were still hung up on what he'd said, and a few had grown to resent him for the remarks he'd made. In the long run, he'd turned them into the exceptional shinobi they were meant to be. In the short term, however, half of them had grown to resent Naruto for his words, and were glad that he'd been placed in permanent solitary. The other half had accepted what he'd said as problems they'd chosen to ignore, and were working to overcome them. That said, a rift had grown between the group, and they weren't as close as before. Sakura, while training with the new Team 10, had asked what had happened to them. Nobody had an answer for her, but they all knew the reason. Naruto was the glue that had brought them together, and without him, they were losing the friendship they once had. Jiraiya had finally gotten out of Karakura, having promised the residents that he would return there soon, and was approaching the gates of Suna. His visage was hardened, and he was a man on a mission. Nothing was gonna stop him from completing his mission. Halt, except for gate officials. When Naruto woke up, he had sat up and stretched, working out any stiffness he'd garnered from sleeping on the ground. Like the fox would let me be stiff and sore, the way it heals me. Naruto internally rolled his eyes as he imagined Kyuubi sitting in its cage howling at how trivial things such as muscle cramps and soreness made for a weak vessel. And then Naruto noticed Gaara just sitting there, in almost exactly the same spot as he'd been in when Naruto had called it a night, staring at him. Gaara? Naruto began, dreading the answer. Have you been staring at me all night? Contrary to what you believe, Uzumaki, the world does not revolve around you. Gaara replied, causing Naruto's face to scrunch up in confusion. What? Gaara sighed. No, I did not stare at you all night. Naruto sighed in relief. I occasionally stared at the moon. Gaara got up, not noticing Naruto's eyebrows start twitching, or the deadpan look his face had donned. Do you know what the personal privacy is, Gaara? The addressed teen simply stared at the blonde, who sighed. Weren't there times back in Suna when you would do things that you'd rather be done without other people watching? When I partook in the upkeep of my personal hygiene, yes. Naruto looked away, his face becoming slightly red at the turn the conversation had taken. Right, well, sleep is one of those things that people don't like having others watch them do. Would you have liked to have people watch you while you bathed? I would have killed them for intruding and interrupting the upkeep of my hygiene. Naruto's face went back into deadpan mode, and his eye was twitching more than before. It took him a second to work up the ability to slap his hand over his face, keeping it there in order to regain his composure, before looking up at the cloudy sky. Gaara simply figured that Naruto was thinking, and reached for the jerky and consuming several pieces, stopping several chews into the first bite and giving a grunt of approval before finishing the half-dozen in his hand. Gaara, Naruto began. To other people, there are certain boundaries that others do not cross. Weren't there things that your siblings did that they wanted to do in private? I do not know. Our interaction outside of missions was very minimal. Even when I tried to partake in group activities or inquired them about such things, it was not successful. By this point, Naruto's eyebrow threatened to start twitching again, and he was well on his way back into deadpan look before sighing and giving up on the conversation. Look, there are just some things that, for the sake of other people's dignity and sanity, other people do not, under any circumstances, do. Now come on, we've got to get going. Naruto put out the fire and filled in the fire pit before packing up. Gaara simply shouldered his gourd and stood by, waiting for Naruto to finish. At that point, Naruto had noticed that Gaara was just standing there while he had to do all the dirty work, and began muttering about damned redheads who don't know when others need help. Unknown to the two of them, their descent into the land of rain was observed by a pair of Jonin Einin. They simply watched the two kids as they went in the direction of the war zone of the damned, not doing anything but silently wishing for painless deaths. Several hours later, it started raining, erasing any trace remnants that the small alcove had been a campsite, and that either of the Einin had ever been there. What do you mean Gaara's missing? Jiraiya had originally come to see if Naruto had hitched a ride with an outgoing caravan and made his way to Suna, but it appeared that there were bigger problems in the Land of Wind. As soon as he'd made his way into Suna, he'd contacted his spies in the Land of Wind, and had promptly been informed of two things. Akatsuki was sighted moving into the Land of Wind. Several days later, the Ichibi Jinchuriki had disappeared overnight. Normally, that wouldn't be much cause for concern, seeing as the Akatsuki had entered the Land of Wind from the Land of Birds suggested that they had to have come from either the Land of Rain or the Land of Fire. His spies hadn't infiltrated the Land of Rain, and it was so closed off that not even a Kage could get in if they wanted, leaving one option left. They'd just come from taking Naruto, and may have already extracted the Kyuubi. Jiraiya didn't want to accept that reality, so he desperately hoped that Naruto was still alive, despite the evidence to support that he had disappeared completely from where the ANBU had dropped him off at, and so, that left him standing in the recently instated Godame Kazekage's office. Aesthetically, it wasn't much different from the Hokage's office. The color scheme was different, but otherwise, there was a bookshelf containing the laws of Tsunade, important trade information, budgetary information, even the different bylaws that govern the individual clans within Suna. Behind the desk, with the sunrise shining directly into the windows, Jiraiya had to cover his eyes to see the man sitting at the desk, the Godame Kazekage. He wore a bandana upon his head, held up with his hitate, though the entire left side of his face was hidden. The bandana was held down by strips of cloth, which wrapped around the bottom of his head and around his neck, disappearing within his gray-beige Jonin flak jacket, which had a small cape attached to the back of it, covering his upper arms. Under his right eye were two red tattoos adopting the visage of two flames turned on their side. Sitting atop his head was a large, angular hat, with the kanji for wind in the middle of a blue spot marking the front of the hat. This was Baki, the man who was instated as the new Kazekage once they'd realized that Gaara was missing. What I mean, Sannin of Konoha, is that I sent him out to patrol outside the wall of Suna, agreeing with his request to send him alone. The gate guards whom you have met did not report him having returned. It was not until the next day that we found out that he had still not yet returned. I'd sent out a team of Jonin to locate him, but they found nothing. I do not believe that he has gone off on his own, and lately he appeared to have been attempting to be considerate of others' opinions, particularly his brother and sisters. When questioned, they said that their brother had not approached them for their opinion on him going out into the desert. Baki finished. At that point, a state of emergency was called and I was made the Godame, no longer the acting Kazekage. I think I know who may have taken him. The answer prompted Baki to almost lose it as he stood up. Now, before you go off trying to save him, you should know that at this point, all you'll bring home is his body. What are you talking about? All emotion disappeared from the Kazekage's face, and Jiraiya suddenly found himself facing the elite shinobi that was yearning to prove that he was deserving of the title of Kage. He steeled his resolve, despite being enough of a fighter that he could, probably, take down the Kazekage without too much effort on his part. I'm talking about an organization made up of S-class missing nin, an organization that wants to remove the Biju from within the Jinchuriki, and has the means to do so. Jiraiya normally wouldn't explain such things to anyone that wasn't from Konoha, but desperate times called for desperate measures. That organization is called Akatsuki, and by now they've already started the removal of the Ichibi from Gaara. It's too late to save him. There is nothing we can do? Baki sounded strained. He hadn't expected such a horrible thing to occur. As Jiraiya's head moved in the negative, he realized that, while it may be too late to stop this Akatsuki from taking Gaara, He could at least spread word to the other nations of the Akatsuki and their intention with the Biju. Then we will spread word throughout the elemental nations, ensuring that everyone knows of this Akatsuki and their intention to turn the Biju into beasts of war against the elemental nations. The Land of Rain certainly lived up to its name, Naruto thought drearily as he rubbed his arms against each other. It's so damn cold here. Naruto looked at Gaara, who was having a worse time of it than he was. Gaara's sand was absorbing all the water that it came into contact with, so he had to expend extra chakra just to keep his gourd as a gourd. Not to mention the physical exertion of having to carry hundreds of pounds of wet sand, which was denser and heavier than dry sand. Rubbing his arms to get the blood flowing, Naruto wondered if he should ask Gaara if he was okay, as the redhead wasn't showing any sign of being cold. How can he not be cold? He's wearing a t-shirt and pants just like me. Clearly, Naruto had issues. Looking around, there was nothing but the ruins of the city they were in, barely seen in the dark of the day. Naruto was humbled and scared. This was the remains of a city, a snapshot of something they never taught in the academy, a war zone after the war. Several of the buildings still standing were in rather good condition, considering that over half of each individual building appeared to be cleanly cut. And if one looked close, they could see the ghosts of the ninja that had died, lingering in the shadows of the ruins, watching the every move of all the living that dared to pass through the city. And it wasn't just the ghosts of the ninja. In between the flashes of lightning, the civilians that had died as a result of the battle between the Aim and their foes could be seen, going about their lives as though they had never died. Occasionally, a few would be shown looking at the duo, and once Naruto thought he saw one of them beckon him over, like a father would his child. Gaara, let's get the hell out of this town as fast as possible. Naruto looked over at the redhead, who simply nodded, looking rather spooked himself. After all, what good is an absolute defense against the immortal souls of the damned? Rolling out the map, which Naruto did his best to keep dry, he looked over the map of the Land of Rain, figuring their location given their speed and time traveled. Say what you will about him, but Uzumaki Naruto was much smarter than he appeared to be. Alright. Naruto lifted his knee up and laid the map upon his upper leg, setting in on the remains of a wall. Or a ceiling. He wasn't sure which, but all he needed to know was that the remnants of the apartment building kept them dry and out of the rain. It looks like we're about a week out from the Land of Earth, at this rate. If we're lucky and can pick up the pace, we should be able to shave a few days off of the trip. Once there, we can stop at this town here, Rakongai. It's labeled as a market town, with a few casinos. Guess I'll see if my lucky streak works just as well with gambling as it does with my fights. Do you agree? Gaara just looked at him before inclining his head in what Naruto had learned to interpret as being in the positive. Good. He rolled up the map. Let's get some sleep here and head out in the morning. That night had to be the scariest the two had ever had. Gaara, in accordance with Naruto's pleas, had taken to using the nights meditating, steeling his mind against the ramblings of Shikaku. While it was impressive at making entire hours seem like minutes, Gaara was still prone to being woken up by the slightest of sounds, making for great company for a light sleeper such as Naruto. Out of the enclosed space, the rain continued, unrelenting in its onslaught upon the landscape. Inside the dark remains of what had once been a house, Naruto laid against a pile of rubble, which had been crushed under his weight to fit him perfectly, while Gaara simply got into the basic meditative position, closed his eyes, and hadn't moved since. More than an hour passed, and nothing changed. Gaara's sand had moved to enclose him, keeping the cold from affecting his body, while Naruto was left to fend off the cold for several minutes, fidgeting to keep warm until a blanket of sand moved to enclose him like it did Gaara. A nigh incoherent thanks was given before all was silent once more, and then there was sound. Gaara was the first to wake, with Naruto barely a second later, shouldering the pack in a single smooth movement. The sand silently slithered back into the gourd, though the plug was left out for easy access. Naruto, being the lighter of the two, moved towards the doorway of the wrecked room, looking out into the crumbled shell of the rest of the house. He had to stop himself from screaming. When they had entered what had appeared to be an untouched house, all save for one room was obliterated, leaving a broken and crumbled shell of a house to stand. Now, however, it was as though the inside hadn't been gutted at all. Naruto looked back at Gaara, who swiftly moved to see what the problem was. The house was bright, and the second floor, which had not existed previously, was very obviously there. Sitting in the kitchen were a family of civilians, all of them brunettes with gray eyes. There were the parents, who looked to be in their early 30s, a teenage daughter, a younger son who looked to be about 6 years of age, and small toddler running around being chased by the mother while the father stood at the stove cooking food. The duo started backing up, eyes wide with fear, until they hit the wall. Is there another way out? Gaara's voice was soft, barely carrying onto Naruto's ears. No, that's why we chose this room. It's closed off from the outside and warm. Naruto answered, not turning his head away from the impossible thing in front of him. Perhaps it is a genjutsu? Gaara stated. Not likely. You have enough of Shikaku's chakra in you that any genjutsu won't really work on you. Naruto replied, before an idea came to him. If I can blow through the wall behind us, then it's a straight shot outside, right? My understanding of the layout of this building has outside being on the other side of this wall, yes. Gaara didn't see where the blonde was going with that thought. As far as he knew, there was nothing in their arsenal of jutsu that was powerful enough. Good. Be prepared to run. Naruto held out his hand, doing something that was a first for him, a one-handed Rasengan. He launched his arm out, making noise as it crushed the wall in front of him, sending shrapnel into the room around him, making Gaara's sand raise in front of him in defense. The second Naruto was through, he ran, the room collapsing in around him as Gaara slipped out, following Naruto as the two ran, the house turning into rubble behind them. The sound of the family laughing, however, did not cease until well into the morning. Several days passed, though it didn't appear that way. All Naruto knew was that when it was nighttime, the darkness descended into a pitch black that ate up all light that dared to intrude upon its domain. Ever since the night at that house, the ghosts of the damned began to follow them everywhere they went, even to the barren, muddy fields, where a spiky orange-haired, blue-eyed Aim could be seen simply watching them as they went past, his form disappearing in the instance that lighting lit up the sky and surrounding area. Soon afterwards, they reached the border, and were in the land of Earth, the ghosts of the damned watching from where the rain and clouds stopped, staring at two souls that had been able to escape their grasp. For now, the land of Earth was completely different from the land of rain. Where the land of rain had been like a perpetual swampland where the few forests were, the land of Earth was mountainous. The sweeping beauty of the mountains was a sharp contrast to the dark marshes, grabbing and holding on the souls of all who died there. Where the swampland and half-sunken ruins of dozens of cities were a veritable hell, the mountains appeared to sweep you up, pulling you towards the heavens to feel even a brief glimpse of what it must be like in the afterlife. The bustling market city of Tenchigai appeared as its name suggests, City of Heaven. The people walking around appeared to perpetually be happy, accepting anyone into their graces. The entire city appeared to shine with a holy light as the sun hit it while rising in the sky, and there were rumors that it looked like it was on fire when watching the light of the sunset on the city from a distance. Naruto liked it. Gaara didn't. While I understand the need to get more supplies, I do not understand how we will get money gambling when we have no money to gamble. Gaara stated, as they walked into one of the casinos, a little joint that looked like someplace that Tsunade would have frequented. That's easy. I know a bit about gambling. Granny Tsunade is very talkative when she's in the right state of drunkenness. Gaara just looked at Naruto, the explanation not good enough. He rolled his eyes and chuckled, an odd sound with his smooth voice that got more than a few women to look around, trying to find the source of that sultry sound. Besides, all we need to do is sweet-talk the owner into loaning us just enough to start. From there, we'll win enough to pay him back, and still have enough left over to keep us afloat for a while. Your financial skills are highly admirable. Well, back at the orphanage, they taught us how to budget our income before teaching us anything else. Naruto replied as they approached the loan's office. I must admit that I did not believe that your plan would work. Gaara bluntly stated as Naruto handed him enough chips to pay back the loan, before sending him on his way with strict orders to say nothing except to state the reason he went there. They were currently seated in a poker table, with Naruto being the clear one to beat, what with the small mountain of chips in front of him. Well, a voice said, approaching the table. Looks like you're the one to beat in this casino. Yeah. I must be lucky, never played before. Naruto said, pretending to look at his winnings and all. And to be honest, I don't really know the rules all that well. You're a damn good liar, kid, I'll give you that. The person said as he sat down at the table. He had red hair, a brighter shade than Gaara's, and wore it in a high ponytail, almost becoming a top knot. On his head, he wore an oddly shaped brown headpiece, looking almost like a crown. The headpiece appeared to travel down and over the bridge of his nose, and in the center of it sat a Hittite, signaling that the person who bore it was allied with IWA. His clothes appeared rather simple, a purple shirt with skin-tight cloth gauntlets on both his arms, and a sleeveless flak jacket on over his shirt. The name's Rashi. What's yours? In the city of Tenchigai, there was a casino. It was rather simple in looks, the same as any other casino, and appeared to be no different than any other casino in the elemental nations, with the sole exception that it was about to be known as the place that the entirety of history changed. Sitting across from each other were two people, one a red-headed IWA in his 30s, staring down his opponent, a 12-year-old blonde-haired, blue-eyed child. They were currently locked in psychological warfare, staring each other down and trying to call the other's bluff. In the end, the both kept raising, until the pile in the middle of the table was the largest that the casino had ever seen. Standing behind the blonde-haired child was another child, a redhead like his friend's opponent, but the trio clearly was not related to each other, given that the blonde was tan where the redhead was pale, and neither bore any resemblance to the 35-year-old man sitting across from them. Eventually, they both turned their heads, setting their twin piercing gaze upon the poor cardholder, who asked the players to show their hands. 3 of a kind, kid. Beat that. The man said, setting down his cards, showing a trio of 9s, and setting aside the useless 2 and 5. How about a royal flush, aces high? Naruto gave, laying down his entire hand before turning to the cardholder to see who won. The child wins the pot. The man stated, looking like he'd rather be anywhere than standing between the two. And I must implore you to be on your individual ways, as the last pot very nearly broke the bank. All right. Rashi conceded, taking his chips and placing them into a small pouch. I know when I'm beat. Though, kid, I'd really like to know where you learned to bluff so well. Naruto simply gave a knowing smile, looking at the man in amusement before answering with 4 simple words. I know a guy. Rashi laughed. I do too, but he isn't nearly as good a teacher as you've had, apparently. Naruto grinned, and he and Gaara worked to pile their small mountain of chips into their backpack. I dunno. You were pretty good yourself. How's about we trade notes? Naruto's smirk made Rashi stop in his tracks, looking at Naruto oddly. You know, he said, putting his chin in his hand. You look like someone I once knew in a half-remembered dream. Don't drag me into your limbo, old man. Naruto replied, kinda creeped out. I'm 35. Was Rashi's reply, and with that, he went to cash his chips. And why don't you meet me out front, One Tail and Nine Tail? The two stiffened, and Gaara looked at Naruto, presumably for guidance. Shall I kill him? Naruto palmed his face, having seen and heard the dead seriousness. No, Gaara. Are you sure we would not be better off with him dead? Yes, Gaara, because I could very easily. Gaara! No! Naruto yelled out, his face coming out of his hands as he started moving towards the trade counter. Geez, what's with you and being all death-happy all of a sudden? I have always been eager to kill. It is just that we have not encountered anyone whom I can satisfy it upon. Naruto's head never left the palm of his hand as he traded in the chips for cash. So, it is impolite to ask if it is okay to kill someone? At Naruto's nod, he continued. Then I will not ask in the future. GRH. No. It is not good to kill anyone you want, anytime you want, anywhere you want. But then, what am I to do in battle if I cannot kill? Naruto's eyebrow threatened to fling off of his face, the way it was twitching, before an idea came to him. Actually, I just remembered. It is polite to ask for my permission to kill someone, so long as you don't do it if I say no. Naruto looked pleased with himself. Now he wouldn't have to deal with Gaara's twisted logic for several hours. Then why did you not say so? Damn it, hey! The duo turned, looking to see Rashi approach them, a bag slung over his shoulder. I see the two of you are pretty good at following orders. Yeah? Naruto chose to cut to the chase. Why'd you say that? Say what? I wasn't aware I'd said anything to you except to meet me out here. Rashi looked bemused at the grumpy expression on Naruto's face. Stop screwing around, you know what I'm talking about. Naruto's grumpy expression disappeared in an instant, and Rashi suddenly knew where he'd seen the kid's face before. I meant what I said, but first I've gotta ask, Rashi said, bending down to reach Naruto's height. While he was no longer the shortest of the Konoha 11, he was still growing, and had been growing steadily during the past few weeks. As it stood, his baggy clothes weren't as bad as when he first woken up in them. Are you related to the bloody habanero, by any chance? The bloody what? A Wagakure stood off in the distance, blending into the mountainous surroundings by having had the tops of the small rocky spires turned into the buildings that made up the hidden village. 2 figures stood in the distance, watching the village for a single person. One man was tall, easily towering over the other at over 6 feet in height. Anything else to describe the man was hidden underneath the black cloak decorated with red clouds he wore, making him appear smaller than he really was. His head was covered with a long bandana, which held a piece of cloth to cover all of his face below the eyes, which held pupilless green irises with red sclera. Be on the lookout, Haiden. It should be quite clear to find my target. His gruff voice told his shorter compatriot, who had pupilless amethyst eyes and slicked back silver hair. Yeah? The newly named Haiden replied, looking out over the city. He wore a cloak of the same design as his partner, but instead of having it completely closed off, he had the top undone, showing his bare chest, along with the emblem he had hanging from a chain necklace, of a triangle in a circle. So you were told what he looks like. Mind filling me in? Trust me, you'll know him when you see him. The man replied, making his partner twitch in annoyance. You know, Kakuzu, you make it really hard for me to work with you sometimes. Haiden said, looking back out at the hundreds of people waking up and beginning to go about their day, a look in his eye that many would recognize as bloodlust. But if it means that I can get to kill those people in the name of Jashin, then I think I can deal. The newly named Kakuzu simply stood there, ignoring his idiotic partner in favor of scanning the IWA for the Jinchuriki of the Gobi. Just who do you think you are, intruding upon a Wagakure like this? A baritone voice emanated from behind them, making Haiden move away while an extremely dense jet of water shot out of Kakuzu's back, ripping a hole in his cloak. The mystery man simply held out his hand, making the jet of water turn into steam, which got sucked up into the apparatus situated upon his back. Perhaps you did not hear me the first time. Who are you and why do you intrude upon a Wagakure like this? Well, Kakuzu thought, turning to meet his attacker and finding his target. Maybe this will be easier than I thought. What are they teaching kids these days, if you don't know about the bloody habanero? Rashi asked, looking at them disbelievingly. Do you at least know about the yellow flash? Yes. Naruto replied quickly. He was the Yondaime Hokage, served as such for a little over 3 years before dying to save the village from destruction at the feet of the Kyuubi. That's good enough, but you glossed over several things, Gaki. Ignoring the blonde's cry that he wasn't a Gaki, Rashi continued. You obviously don't know of his exploits on the battlefield of the Third Great Shinobi World War. In one battle, he slaughtered 50 IWA in a single second, not to mention the hundreds he'd killed in the border skirmishes. The bloody habanero didn't garner as many kills as he did, but she was dangerous in her own right. I was the only one to survive against her when we reached the gates of Konoha, a platoon of almost 200, dead within minutes. Wow. I've never heard of her. Naruto was shocked that there were other legends from the Third Great Shinobi World War than the Yellow Flash. Do you know what her name is? I do not, though I heard she died when the Kyuubi had appeared within the walls of Konoha. Rashi stated, looking downcast at that. And I wanted to know her name so badly. Ah. Where are my manners? I've forgotten to ask for your names, Uzumaki Naruto, Sabaka no Gaara, and while we're at it, you mind telling me just why there are 2 Jinchuriki from hidden villages not associated with the land of Earth doing here? Kakuzu had to almost kill Haiden in order to be able to properly take down his target, and was now in heated battle with the steam release user. He had to admit that it was quite hard to take down someone who could combat all his attacks with that damnable steam of theirs. It was the most fun Kakuzu had had in a long time. Pointing his right arm at Han, it extended forth, detaching from the rest of his body, yet still held up by black threads. And from the stump of his arm came a beating, pulsating mass of those tentacle-like black threads, and with them came a mask, which held the likeness of a bull drawn with yellow lines. The mouth opened. Han sent out his steam. There was a sound of thunder, and all went still. Well, Naruto started stuttering, and was saved by Gaara, who bluntly stated, he was banished from his village, and I chose to follow him when he came to mine. Naruto didn't know quite why his eyebrow kept twitching, but he was sure that it hadn't done so before Gaara joined him on his journey. Rashi simply stared on, surprised at the frankness of the young redhead. Let's see, Rashi thought. He's definitely from Suna, and I know enough to figure that the blonde one is from either Kumo or Konoha, which means, you contain the Ichibi. He pointed at Gaara, then at Naruto. Which makes you the holder of the Kyuubi. The simple quirking of an eyebrow told him that the redhead had expected this, while the face palm of the blonde completely shocked him. The redhead turned to the blonde. Now may I? No means no, damn it. The blonde's head never rose from his hands as he said that. If anything, it seemed to go deeper into them, if that was possible. Rashi didn't quite know what to think of them. We're dead. So dead. Dead, 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 dead. Naruto began to sing the word in his head like some kinda demented mantra. Here they were, no stronger than fresh chunin, and they had just been outed by an IWA jonin. Naruto's face met his palms and he began to pray that something, anything, really, happened so that they could get the hell out of Dodge. Now may I, oh gods, is Gaara asking to kill the guy now? No means no, damn it. He responded, before burying his face deeper into his hands. Dead, 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 dead. Kakuzu's eyes started twitching. Lightning hadn't worked as well as he'd hoped. If anything, it made the Jinchuriki's steam more powerful. Lightning beats water every time, damn it. Clearly he had issues. Sighing, he was about to do something he'd never done before, and hoped to whatever god there was he would never have to do again. His only prayer went out to being able to face himself later on, when it was all over. Haiden, get your ass over here and help me. What? I thought that the great and mighty Kakuzu, slayer of hundreds, could take on a simple Jinchuriki. It's only steam after all, was Haiden's sarcastic reply from where he'd taken refuge. A quarter mile up the mountain. Shut up and haul ass before I kill you. Kakuzu was getting irritated. He was just one insult away. Like you can kill me? That's it. Haiden was gonna die by Kakuzu's hand, no matter what. Han merely watched the interaction before setting his steam upon Kakuzu, who dodged, before going in close for the kill shot, his arm ready with the earth release. Earth's spear. Nothing would stop him from winning the battle, if only just to kill Haiden for his heckling on the sidelines. You can do it, Kakuzu. Steam is a weak-ass element. That comment seems to make the Jinchuriki double up on his attacks, his eyes reflecting the pure rage boiling within him from Haiden's comment. Yes, he'll enjoy killing Haiden so much it'll hurt. So, since you, Blondie, here Naruto started moaning and began to mutter the word dead over and over under his breath. Appear to be the boss. How's about you tell me, is your friend here telling the truth? Naruto broke his mantra to nod, his face pale, before descending back into his mantra. Rashi sighed. Why are all the people I meet insane? Gaara simply glared at Rashi, focusing all his killing intent towards the man, who was able to shrug it off like Gaara was a fly on his shoulder. Look, I'm not gonna turn you into IWA or hurt you. At this, Gaara's glare lessened, though the killing intent remained as it was, while Naruto had stopped chanting and was slowly regaining his color. I'd just like to know something about you guys. See, I'm the Jinchuriki for the Yambi no Saru, and Gaara's glare redoubled, while Naruto turned ashen before curling up in the fetal position, the mantra resurfacing with vigor. A crowd began forming around them, the meeting brought to their attention by the blonde in the fetal position in the middle of the street. Rashi sighed again. That's it, you've got him on the run. Hurry and take him down now. Kakuzu didn't know if Haiden was deliberately cheering for the Jinchuriki or not, but all he knew was that he was about to call a truce in order for the both of them to kill Haiden. Maybe then he'll be able to take down his target. Come on, man. You're winning. Take him, huh? Haiden was interrupted when Kakuzu had pointed his arm at Haiden, sending his hand towards him as fast as was possible. Kakuzu's hand latched onto Haiden's leg, who had barely had time to acknowledge the act, before using his arm as a slingshot, sending him flying. He collided with the Jinchuriki, and both were down soon after. Kakuzu almost smiled. It seemed that Haiden had his worth alive after all. Nothing to see here, folks, just a few rowdy teens who wanted to gamble, Rashi said, picking up the blithering blonde and heading towards the outskirts of town, the redhead hot on his tail. Soon he reached a secluded enough spot and began to slap some sense into the ashen blonde. Literally, it had taken quite a few slaps before the gaki would even begin to respond, and a half dozen after that to get him back to normal. Now, Rashi affixed a stern eye on the blonde. As I was saying before I was interrupted, I am the Jinchuriki for the Yambi no Sara. He redoubled the stern look on Naruto, keeping him from having a near mental breakdown. And I'd like to know what your relationship with your Biju is. Shikaka does not allow me to sleep, as doing so plagues me with its bloodiest memories. Other than that, any usage of the demonic chakra has me changing into the beast, and it forcing me into using the Tanuki sleep jutsu. Gaara replied, and Rashi nodded sagely. And you, boy? Rashi now turned to Naruto, who took a second to start talking. Kyuubi does not seem to like me, as the one time I've talked to it, the fox made it clear that it'd like nothing more than to watch me die as it escapes the seal. I can only use chakra when my life depends on it, or if I'm really mad. I've not drawn on much of its chakra yet, but when I drew upon enough, it altered my mind for over a week, making me extremely angry. Naruto went on. No one, not Granny Tsunade, or even that pervy sage Jiraiya could figure out what caused it to do that. Rashi nodded in contemplation before providing his answer. Sounds like you've simply had the common problem every Jinchuriki had when they drew upon enough of their demon's chakra to form the first tail for the first time. What was it? Naruto looked interested, having never known that there was so much to learn about Jinchuriki, and Gaara had to admit that the knowledge was quite important to have. You weren't prepared for it, and the excess chakra lingered in the part of your mind that lets you draw upon it. And the reason for it lasting so long is that everybody underestimates the density of demonic chakra, which is why it took a week for your body to filter it out of your system. Rashi stated, had something happened while you were in the first tail state to use up the excess chakra, you would have been perfectly fine. Rashi sagely said. I've had it happen myself, as have the Jinchuriki before me, and so will those after me. So it happens to all the Jinchuriki? Only those that haven't prepared for such a thing. It's rare, but it happens. Rashi answered. And after that once, it doesn't happen again. Naruto looked much more like his old self, and Rashi suddenly realized that the battle at the gates of Konoha was where he'd seen someone like Naruto. What did you say your name was? Uzumaki Naruto. Why? Because you look like a young version of Namake's Minato, the yellow flash of Konoha. Kakuzu strode over towards the two, and saw that, while Haiden was still lying on the ground, the Jinchuriki was getting up. Seizing his chance, he curled his hand into a fist, hardened it with Earth Release, Earth Spear, and sped forth, hitting the Jinchuriki with a gut shot, then an uppercut for good measure, which sent the Jinchuriki down. Hey, you wanna help me over here? Your damned plan snapped my neck. Well, there went his good mood. Kakuzu turned to his partner, looked at him for a second before bending down to pick up his target. Fix it yourself, was his oh so succinct answer. How? Here Haiden twisted his head, watching as Kakuzu started walking away, his target hoisted over his shoulder and against his back. If you haven't noticed, I can't move anything below the neck. That means that you either leave me here to be found by Iwa, spilling all our secrets to them, or you carry both me and Herc. Haiden was cut off when one of Kakuzu's black threads struck out and hit him, digging into his neck and connecting the separated vertebrae back together. Haiden lifted his arm to grab at the pain that was emanating from his neck that he was sure was going to remain there. Kneading the muscles and shifting his head, he looked over at Kakuzu, a dark smile on his face. Now that's more like it. Kakuzu, however, chose to ignore the silver-haired man, not stopping in his journey west. You'd best hurry up. We don't need the annoyance of the Iwa that undoubtedly heard the battle. Haiden looked put out but followed anyway. And I didn't get to sacrifice anyone to Jashin. The duo fled west, to the base they had on the border of the land of Earth and the land of Marsh. There they would meet up with another member, and aid him in obtaining another Jinchuriki. Yeah, right. Like I'm related to him. Naruto started laughing at the insinuation that he was the child of the Yondaime Hokage. I'm serious, kid, Rashi stated, looking at the blonde suspiciously. I'd bet the Yambi on it. The sudden knowledge of just how serious Rashi was, if he was willing to bet the demon his body needed to keep living, cast a pall upon the group, and Naruto stopped laughing, opting to simply stare at the ground. I am not surprised at that revelation. Uzumaki does bear a striking resemblance to the Yondaime Hokage, Gaara said, looking at Rashi. Why? Naruto said, catching the attention of the two redheads. I don't know, but if I had to guess, I'd say that he couldn't ask anyone to do something. Rashi was cut off. No, I figured that already. What I don't understand is why I was never told of either of my parents. Here Naruto looked at the two, who found themselves in a position that neither wanted to be in, emotional comfort. Well, back in Iwa, they're still pretty sore about how bad he beat us, and if you would gladly take any chance to get some sort of vengeance upon the man. Desperate people are not above killing newborns, so long as they achieve what they set out to do, Rashi stated, once more with the sage voice. As for your mother, perhaps your caretaker. I grew up in a public orphanage. The caretakers treated me like they would any other. Naruto cut in. After I joined the academy, I moved into an apartment, like the others who'd signed up. From there I'd lived alone. Oh. Rashi looked uncomfortable discussing such things. Well, we already know why they didn't tell you about your father, but I think that you may have been meant to have been told about your mother when you reached a certain age. The scroll. Naruto's face lit up, and he set his backpack on the ground before starting to dig into it. Scroll? Rashi looked to Gaara for an explanation. This is the first I've heard of a scroll. Gaara answered, and the two looked at the blonde squatting on the ground digging through clothes and money. Aha! He cried, lifting the scroll he'd originally dismissed when he'd woken up weeks ago. His face of triumph instantly disappeared when the scroll was snatched out of his hands by the older redhead, who opened it up. Huh! Rashi said, and no emotion could be seen upon his visage. Uzumaki Kushina, the red-hot-blooded habanero. He looked up at Naruto. Seems you're a legend in the making, Gaki. Really? My mother's the one you fought against? Naruto was amazed at having had a pair of famed parents, and also slightly intimidated. I've a long way to go if I'm to ever live up to their expectations. Rashi kept reading, his face impassive, until he got to a single line, where his eyes widened and his mouth was ageki. My god! He almost whispered, and Naruto looked concerned whilst Gaara was showing that he was openly interested in the conversation. Rashi looked at Naruto, and the blonde's blood froze in his veins once the man's next sentence sunk in. She was the previous Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi. Kakuzu and Haiden made their way to the border as fast as they could, passing by the outskirts of Tenchigai, the legendary marketing city of the land or earth. When they passed by 3 people, an Iwa and 2 teens, one blonde and the other a redhead like the Iwa. The trio looked at the Akatsuki duo before the Iwa recognized the man Kakuzu had slung over his back. Let him go. The Iwa's voice was filled with enough killing intent that Kakuzu felt the need to be wary around him. He was definitely a Jonin, possibly S-class. The 2 kids looked surprised at the Iwa's reaction, and Kakuzu realized why. They were still moving as fast as they could, and it was highly likely that they couldn't see the instantaneous reaction. Shit. Pick up the pace, Haiden, we're gonna have a tail. Haiden couldn't look happier at the news, and Kakuzu figured that his partner was already thanking his thrice-damned god for such luck. The Akatsuki duo did not stop, continuing on to their destination. What? Let who go? Naruto was confused. 1 second he was talking to Rashi about his mother, learning that she was the previous Jinchuriki for the same demon he had sealed in him, when suddenly Rashi looked behind him and Gaara, telling someone to let him go. Rashi suddenly realized that Naruto and Gaara hadn't noticed the cloak duo, so he made a sudden decision. Pack up your stuff and follow me, boys. My friend's been kidnapped, and we're gonna rescue him. The pursuit was long, and gave Naruto time to think. His father was the Yondaime. The Yondaime sealed Kyuubi into him. The Kyuubi had a Jinchuriki before him. That Jinchuriki was his mother. Without the Kyuubi, his mother would have undoubtedly died. This left Naruto confused. He had always longed to know the identity of his parents, but had accepted that it might never happen, due to so many others having been orphaned on the day of his birth. Back in the orphanage, there had been few who were old enough to remember their parents, and even fewer who could claim they knew with certainty who their parents were. Now that he knew, however, Naruto wondered if he ever should have been told. There were few things that he could accurately define as the absolute truth, and from what he had learned these past few hours, even those were called into question. Why was he loyal to a village that had hated his very existence? Why was his status as a Jinchuriki kept secret from him for all those years? What was the truth? From what little he knew, it seemed that his father had longed to be the greatest shinobi in all of existence, to have the strongest tools to use. He had to have garnered such infamy. Naruto remembered a girly-looking boy, and his claim that his only purpose in life was to serve his master, to give his life if his master so desired. Was that what his father had desired? To befriend his mother, and get her to become the perfect tool for him? What had that meant for his mother, for Kushina, when she hadn't become the perfect tool for his father? When she told him that she was pregnant? Was it then that the Yondaime had figured that he could remove Kyuubi from Kushina, seal it in his son in Naruto, and simply raise the child to be the perfect tool, even better than Haku had been for Zabuza? Naruto didn't know. He didn't want to know. Because then he'd be forced to hate the one person in existence he'd idolized. The one person who he'd always strived to become a better Hokage than. And that's when it hit him, as he followed Rashi, Gaara at his side. The Sandaime was a smart man. The smartest in all the elemental nations. He was hailed as the greatest of the Kage because of it, which meant that he had to know, which meant that he did know. The scroll from Tsunade had said that the scroll about his mother was something the Sandaime wished to give to Naruto in person. That meant he knew that his mother had been Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. That he knew that the Yondaime was turning his son into the perfect tool for himself. And yet, the Sandaime had still preached the best of his successor to Naruto, back when he was little. Had he been making sure that Naruto didn't hate his father when he finally found out? Or was he just ensuring that Naruto became the perfect tool for Konoha, like his father had wanted for himself? Naruto began questioning all of his life. He had first wanted the role of Hokage not because of his need to have people look up to him instead of down, but because the Sandaime had made it seem like the greatest thing to achieve in life. He had become a ninja for that very purpose. It had been the very reason he joined the academy, as the Sandaime had given him the very push into doing so, when he'd been uncertain about life as a ninja. Naruto hated to think in such negative terms, but it was the closest thing to the truth as he was gonna get for what might be years. Now that he had his resolve back, he wondered why he and Gaara were helping the guy in front of them get his friend back. They had nothing outside of helping the guy out of the kindness of their hearts. And even then, it wasn't completely known. "Hey, Gaara?" Naruto asked, his face showing his uncertainty. His red-headed companion inclined his head, which Naruto took to mean that he was listening. "Why are we helping this guy?" "I do not know, but I believe that it is because he is quite knowledgeable in Jinchuriki, which could prove useful to us." "Huh!" Gaara sighed, and Naruto could tell that he struck a nerve. He knows things about Jinchuriki that we do not. We would like to know those things. So we help him, and he tells us what he knows. Well, why didn't you say so in the first place? Naruto was exasperated, and Gaara sighed again. "I did, you just did not understand the wording." Naruto's eye went right back to twitching as they ran across the mountainous plain, using all they could to keep up with the speeds the IWA Jonin in front of them was hitting. "Stop!" They doubled back. "Turn around." Kakuzu almost sighed. The day had been pretty par for the course, so he hadn't had much in the way of complaints. He'd had a small moment of not elation, that kind of thing he'd long since abandoned content when he'd taken down his target, whilst simultaneously getting cathartic on Haiden's ass. And then they just had to come across an IWA Jonin in S-Class 1, by the feel of his killer intent. And now that S-Class IWA Jonin was following them, and gaining on them. "Damn it, Haiden, hold up," Kakuzu said, stopping suddenly and looking around. The mountainous terrain had given way to humid forest, and the ground was becoming less like ground and more like swamp. They were close to, if not in, the land of Marsh. If they continued with the tale, then it would follow them, and one of their hideouts would be outed. Kakuzu may have been many things, but one thing he never did was fail a mission. Not again. And if it took killing their tail to do so, so be it. Naruto kept moving, his eye having slowly stopped twitching, but he was panting, tired from the chase. His legs felt like they were on fire, and the flow of cool air in his hot lungs made them feel like they weren't even there, making him almost gasp for breath. If it weren't for his own chakra boosting those parts and Kyuubi's healing, Naruto was sure that he would have dropped down in exhaustion some time ago. Next to him, Gaara showed no change, but Naruto figured that he had to be in the same situation. In front of the two, Rashi kept going, grim determination coupled with an almost blind rage set upon his visage, which made Naruto cringe. Gotta remember to never piss him off. Looking around as much as he could when moving at such high speeds, Naruto saw that the mountain spiked up one last time before descending into a lush forest that was so humid it was felt several seconds of high-speed travel before entering the forest proper. Once they made the descent the air became thick, almost like it was pressing down upon the trio. Naruto found it kinda hard to breathe, and a quick look over to Gaara revealed that the insomniac was on the verge of losing it, having grown in an environment where the air was dry and arid, not humid to the point where it was like breathing water. "Oh crap, Gaara." Naruto's voice didn't reach the hyperventilating redhead, so he tried harder, more forcefully. He wouldn't have Gaara lose it, not when they were helping a man that could kill them on a whim. "Gaara, look at me." This reached the sand user, who snapped his head to look at the blonde. Gaara's face was contorted in something akin to the face one sees when another has a heart attack. His eyes were as wide as possible, pure fear reflecting within the teal depths. Naruto moved in front of Gaara, so that the former Tsunade wouldn't hit anything in his path. "Now I know you aren't used to a place like this, but I want you to do exactly what I say. Do you understand?" A terse nod and Naruto continued. "I want you to channel some chakra into your lungs, and then take slow, deep breaths, okay?" Slow, deep breaths. Gaara nodded, and he started doing as Naruto said. Taking a slow breath in, he found that the chakra in his lungs seemed to make it so he could breathe normally. His face returned to its normal, apathetic look, though he gave Naruto a tiny half-smile in gratitude, which the blonde returned in full. "If we're gonna stick together, we gotta look out for each other, right?" Naruto answered Gaara's unspoken thanks before looking back at Rashi, who appeared to be slowing down. "We're close." Rashi growled, and the blonde made a second mental note to never fuck with a man's friends, if this is what he's like when angry. A pulse of killing intent was sent out from the older redhead, and Naruto felt a small chill run down his spine, not unlike a cube of ice down the back. Scary. The chase continued well into the land of Marsh, which made Naruto wonder if Rashi was as loyal to IWA as they thought he was. Before they could contemplate it further, Rashi had stopped and Naruto had to latch onto the branch he was about to land upon. Behind him, Gaara had an easier time stopping, using his sand as a platform to come to a stop. In front of them were three people. One of them wore crimson samurai armor all over his body, with an odd engine-like thing upon his back, emitting steam. That man had, mostly hidden by the metal casca he wore, a head signifying allegiance to IWA. He was unconscious, and lay behind the other two. Both wore black cloaks with red clouds. Naruto's heart stopped as he realized who Rashi's friend was. Another one. Another one just like him. And he was in danger of having his biju removed and die. Naruto wouldn't wish such a thing on anyone, no matter where they came from. So he reached behind him, pulling out his last two kunai and holding them in a reverse grip. Behind Naruto, Gaara-san deposited him upon a tree branch before swirling around him menacingly. Careful, Gaara. These guys are Akatsuki. Of course, Naruto didn't need to explain the enemy's allegiance, as the cloaks were a dead giveaway, but it never hurt to be sure everyone was on the same page. Rashi heard the comment and looked at the two contemplatively. Akatsuki, huh? Who hired you then? It wasn't a question. The taller one, his head covered by a gray hood with a bandana and face mask to complete it, answered. To take capture or extract the tailed beasts from their hosts is the supreme order given from the higher-ups of Akatsuki. The Taki missing nin answered, his voice unnaturally gruff. Yeah. The shorter, silver-haired man echoed, before Naruto had to duck in order to dodge a tri-bladed scythe, whose blades were a vibrant shade of red. It was connected by a chain-like rope that led back to the silver-haired Akatsuki, and it took a second for Naruto to realize who the scythe had hit, since Naruto had crouched down. Gaara. Looking back, Naruto saw that he needn't have worried. Gaara's sand defense had stopped the scythe when it was mere feet from him. The redhead looked up the scythe in what appeared to be curiosity, even watching it as the silver-haired Akatsuki member called it back to his hand. Can I kill that man? Gaara looked at Naruto, whose eye went back to twitching. Again, yes. Gaara adopted a very disturbing smile, looking almost crazed. Fantastic. Rashi stood, looking past his opponent, to the downed man on the ground past him. Why do you care for him? Your village doesn't seem to, if my intel stands to reason. His opponent said, looking for all the world as if he didn't really care what the answer was. While they may dislike him, that doesn't mean that I don't. Here Rashi smirked. Besides, no one does that to my kid brother and gets away with it. Rashi made several hand seals, ending on the snake. Suddenly, the ground between Han and Kakuzu split, lifting up and away until a great chasm divided the two. What a unique way to use Earth Flow Divide, Kakuzu said, looking behind him before turning back towards his opponent. But that tactic won't work with me, wasn't my point. Now GKI. Rashi called, putting his hands on the dragon hand seal, inhaling and breathing out a phoenix. The great creature was huge, easily seen from miles away, and while it was made entirely of fire, it gave off not heat. The mythic firebird spread its wings, letting out an unearthly screech. While Kakuzu was distracted by the blazing creature born of a jutsu he had never heard of, Naruto ran past him, heading up the incline, and was about to jump the chasm to ensure their target's safety when his hair, which had been slowly growing out, was snatched from behind and yanked, sending Naruto into a world of pain as he was flung directly into the giant phoenix bearing down upon Kakuzu. As this happened, a pulsating mass of the black tentacle threads appeared over Kakuzu's right shoulder, attached to the man from similar tentacle threads coming from within the wide collar of his cloak, a blue bird mask facing the giant firebird. The mouth of the mask opened and a piercing shriek was briefly heard over the ear-shattering screeching of the phoenix before it suddenly blew up in a mass of fire that spread up in the air, in pieces of flicking flames. GKI. Rashi called, and he was answered when Naruto came out from the mass of soot that coated the ground he lay upon, singed all over but otherwise okay, giving a thumbs up to denote the fact. He sighed, and Kakuzu appeared to smirk. That it? He taunted. I expected more of such a powerful jutsu, but it was more flash than show, wasn't it? Rashi didn't answer, instead opting to look up as a single flicker of a flame as it approached him. Not exactly, he replied, holding his hands out before yelling out to Naruto, Get down, Gaki! He clapped his hands upon the flicker, and it exploded, barely missing Naruto as he went flat on the ground, while the explosion engulfed Kakuzu's entire form. The roar of the fire was so loud Naruto almost missed hearing a piercing screech before the explosion reached him. Gaara appeared to be toying with Haiden, simply standing there as the man kept sending his scythe at him and failing to draw blood. He had one hell of a time studying how Haiden attacked, his patterns, the way he stood when launching the scythe in certain ways. He found it odd, to say the least. This man was supposed to be S-class, yet displayed nothing to show that he was deserving of such a title. Suddenly the supposed S-class Nin appeared to realize that injuring Gaara was futile, and chose to make several hand seals, which startled Gaara. He hadn't thought that the man, who had introduced himself as Haiden, would know ninjutsu, as the crazed man kept swearing that Gaara's defense was absolutely annoying. The hand seals ended on hair, and the man's skin began to become darker until it was completely black, save for the skin that had paled into white, mimicking the skeletal system. His entire body, meanwhile, became unnaturally gaunt, and Gaara thought that if the cloak were not there, then every single one of the man's organs could be outlined. As it stood, Gaara could see every beat of a pulse in the man's jugular. Picking up his scythe, it too began to change as soon as he made contact, the three blades becoming thinner, longer and closer together, until it looked like a single blade upon a pitch-black pole. Now I won't miss. Haiden laughed, and charged towards Gaara. Their fight was stalled when an ear-splitting shriek wounded its way through the air, making both fighters look back and up in the sky to see a phoenix of fire. Hayden looked shocked, and suddenly realized that such a thing could never come from Kakuzu. While he didn't like Kakuzu, he was sort of fond of the man, who was a pioneer in immortality. And he couldn't dare stand to be partnered with someone else. The only reason he joined Akatsuki was because of his respect of Kakuzu. Hayden moved to make sure his partner was okay when a wall of sand erupted in front of him, blocking his path. I do not believe our fight is over, as I have not yet killed you. Gaara looked livid. Since joining Uzumaki Naruto on his journey, all he'd done was follow the kid who, quite frankly, didn't appear to have a clue what he was doing. And yet, he wasn't quite sure just what compelled him to go with the blonde, but he knew that he had to what it was. And the only way to know was to go with Uzumaki, to follow Uzumaki and learn from him just what it was to truly have bonds with another person, to care for them so much you would die for them. Gaara wasn't sure if he had such a bond with Uzumaki. But that didn't mean he didn't want to have one, and if having that bond meant dealing with Uzumaki's quirkiness, then so be it. He sent a single thought to his sand, coupled with a minute amount of chakra, and began to go on the offensive against the crazed, skeletal maniac. Naruto got up, inhaled, and began coughing. The air was thick with the ash and smoke left over from that explosion, and he yanked up his shirt, covering the lower part of his face while also providing a bit of a filter from the smoke hanging in the air and making his eyes sting. Feeling something wet on the side of his head, he found that his ears were bleeding, and the blood was sliding down, meeting with the blood that hadn't matted his hair down from the bleeding scalp. Rashi! He croaked out, his voice dulled from having his eardrums blown out. Rashi! He was cut off as a hand latched onto the back of his shirt, and yanked, sending Naruto towards whoever had grabbed onto him, and he had a bad feeling about who it was. He suddenly found himself up against a single person, and by the look of the black cloak covering the arm holding him in place, it was clear that he'd become a hostage. There was a piercing shriek right next to his head, and he screamed in pain as a blast of air shot out, barely missing on blowing his head clear off his body and turning it into a bloody, gory mess upon the ground. The blast of air cleared the entire area in front of Naruto and his captor, revealing just how powerful it was. What once was lush marshland was now what one would expect after an intense forest fire. The wet, muddy ground had dried up and cracked, ash and cinders laden upon the ground surrounding what few trees weren't reduced into piles of cinder, or the ash hanging in the air. Naruto was sent into the air, and given that the arm holding him had moved with him, it was clear that Kakuzu had jumped up. The grip on Naruto shifted, and he suddenly found himself pressed against an hard-shaped object hidden underneath the cloth. There was another shriek, and an explosion of air blasted all the ash and smoke out of the air, revealing Rashi, who had moved to cover Han and was now carrying him towards safety. Naruto could feel that Kakuzu was angling to land in the way of Rashi's path, and sorely wished that he hadn't used up almost all of his chakra on keeping up with Rashi. His hands twitched to pull his last two kunai from his pockets before remembering that he'd lost his grip on them when Kakuzu had stopped the first attempt acquisition the armored man. Kakuzu landed, and Rashi stopped, glaring at the man. How adorable. Kakuzu sounded like he was taking some kind of perverse enjoyment in taunting the man. You throw away the life of your little student in favor of saving your brother. It seems that Deidara was right about IWA. You are tactless bastards. Don't you dare mention that maniac's name in my presence. Rashi growled. Do you know what that bastard almost did to my family? I don't give a damn what he did to your family. Hand over the Gobi Jinchuriki before I turn your underling into bloody mist. Naruto felt the hard statue thing move, and it felt like his stomach turned to lead as he realized what it was, another mask thing, like the bird one that could fire deadly blasts of wind. Help! He croaked out, his hoarse voice not carrying very far, but had served its purpose for Kakuzu, as the mask pressing into Naruto's back started to open its mouth. Tears rolled down his face as he began begging, futilely lifting his arms, his muscles having begun feeling the effects of overexertion and tugging on the arm keeping him in place. Please, he whispered. Rashi looked at him, his visage cleared of any emotion. Kill the boy. He isn't my student. Naruto felt his hope for surviving diminish drastically when Rashi said that. No! There was dark chuckling from his captor, and the mask shifted up and to the side as Kakuzu shook with laughter, before stopping and standing tall. Bad choice. The mask against Naruto opened its mouth. There was a high-pitched whistling sound for the briefest of moments, before Naruto felt white-hot pain come from behind before it stopped. Hayden's side swung, and Gaara's sand moved to intercept when it went through the sand like it wasn't there at all. And it wasn't the only thing to come out of the sand, as it appeared to drag several people from within the thin defense of sand. Gaara was surprised, looking at the people, all of whom appeared vaguely familiar. You! One of them cried, and through the throng came a single man. His violet-gray eyes were matched perfectly with his messy sandy blonde hair. Why didn't you die? Gaara was so shocked that he took a step back, and didn't notice when Hayden moved behind him, bringing his scythe into an upward slash straight through Gaara's gourd, sending dozens of people out and around Gaara. And suddenly Gaara realized where he'd seen all of them before. They were the assassins his father had sent after him. The assassins he'd crushed into nothing with his sand. But it doesn't matter, Gaara's uncle, Yashimaru, said. So long as I finally get to kill you, you monster. The blast sent everyone back, and Kakuzu's dead body could be seen lying on the other side of the recently made clearing. Rashi looked at the child who, by all rights, should be ash in the wind, if he was lucky. Surrounding Naruto's entire body was what could only be described as a cloak of red chakra. A single chakra tail lazily moved behind him, the bubbling chakra appendage attached to Naruto's tailbone. Remembering what the Gaki had told him not even hours earlier, Rashi carefully set down his younger brother, moving slowly so as not to agitate the blonde into a potentially dangerous state of mind. Standing up, he faced Naruto. Hey! Naruto's head snapped in his direction, looking desperate. Looking confused. Looking scared. And Rashi remembered that this was still a child. A trained killer, but still a child. And children needed comfort and guidance. How are you feeling? The question was simple enough, but it held a much deeper meaning. Are you like you were before? I feel weird, he said, looking down at the red, bubbling chakra cloak covering him. Lifting his hand, he finally had the chance to marvel at how it seemed to act like a second skin. Splaying his fingers, he watched the cloak do the same, and took notice that the chakra fingers ended in sharp points. Like claws looking at his hand underneath the cloak, he saw that his fingernails had become pointed and harder. He lifted his other hand and tapped one fingernail with the other, finding it was definitely harder and thicker too. Just like claws, Naruto wondered if any other parts of his appearance changed when he drew upon Kyuubi's chakra, but didn't have time to dwell upon it when he and Rashi heard dark chuckling come from across the clearing. So you were able to kill me? Kakuzu mused as he looked down at the cracked mask on his torso before narrowing his eyes. Suddenly the cracked mask started to shift, and the black tentacle threads shown now that it was shattered began to shift and pull, and the two Jinchuriki were beholden to a brief look at the thing that Kakuzu was. The shattered mask, which seemed to have been made as the likeness of a tiger, left Kakuzu's body, and the huge mass of tentacle threads formed into a four-legged beast, holding that shape for a moment before it collapsed, the tentacle threads turning into some kind of water ooze, which soon seeped into the ground, leaving not trace that they were ever there except for the pieces of the mask it used to have. Kakuzu simply watched the whole thing happen before turning his attention back to the blonde he'd been holding hostage not even minutes before. It has been a long time since someone managed to kill me. I'd be more impressed if I hadn't realized you were the other Jinchuriki of IWA. It seems that Kisame will be disappointed you were his given target. He isn't Iwa's other Jinchuriki, Rashi called, his visage darkening as he moved to stand as far from Han as he could. I am, and the ground underneath Rashi erupted like a geyser, spewing out molten lava as a column rose up above all others. And standing upon the geyser, his entire form was in a chakra cloak of his own. But where Naruto's was orange-red, Rashi's could be called the color of blood. Take my brother and get as far away from here as you can. Find you friend and keep Han safe. He called down to Naruto, who simply gave a small nod, using his newly given speed to move to Han's side, picking him up and making to leave before stopping and looking back. I'll get him somewhere safe and come back for you. Don't you die on me. Rashi smiled, and Kakuzu swore that the lava geyser increased its output. Wouldn't dream of it. Naruto left, and it was a few seconds later that Rashi's smile became a smirk as he locked eyes with Kakuzu. And you, my friend, shall become host to a little something I've been working on. Welcome to Hell's playground. And from the geyser of lava, creatures started to stir. Gaara looked around, shock and fear clear upon his face. He tried to use his sand to crush them, but it was to no avail. They just kept coming, as though the sand was never there. Backing up, he hit a tree, and could do nothing as the single kunai his dead uncle wielded slipped straight through the sand and cut into his skin, drawing blood, before pulling back. Got you, a voice said from behind him, as Haiden sped past, swiping some blood to use in his ritual. Holding the small amount of blood on the blade of his scythe, Haiden lowered it to the ground and drew a circle, the tiny drop of Gaara's blood suddenly turning into enough to make a circle with a triangle within. Haiden stepped within the circle, and suddenly his skin began to inflate and return to how he looked before initiating the jutsu, while Gaara's began to thin out, his skin turning black while skeletal markings appeared over the prominent bones in his body. His gourd, too, changed, becoming obsidian black. Accept the sacrifice that I so humbly offer you, Jashin. What have you done to me? Gaara's voice wasn't so much a yell as it was a shriek, and his eyes showed that he was almost hysterical. You have become the ultimate sacrifice one can make for the Lord Jashin, death by those you killed. The greatest thing one can ever do in the name of the Lord. Haiden looked smug, but he didn't count on one thing, Gaara's sand, which lashed out as Yashimaru went in for the kill, crushing the spirit's hand. What the? Gaara suddenly regained his composure, standing still where second before he was shaking like a leaf. It seems that your jutsu has backfired upon you, Gaara stated, his voice calm once more. And now I can finally free myself from the burden of all these kills. Thank you? Haiden screamed in anger, but wasn't stuck in place, unable to move. Gaara's black sand was sent out, crushing all who it came upon. For every spirit that Gaara killed, his pallor returned and the gaunt look he had garnered was fast disappearing, until he was back to his old self. What are you? Haiden stared. No one had ever done that before. No one was that heartless. Gaara stood there, watching his skin as it became his normal pale complexion once more before noticing that his sand hadn't changed back from the obsidian color Haiden's jutsu had turned it into. I am Kurasuna no Gaara, the one who will kill you. Haiden did the only thing he could do, now that the jutsu was broken. He ran, hoping that Kakuzu had gotten his damnable target to the meeting point. Kakuzu stood, panting slightly and glaring at the man standing atop the geyser and simply watching as the hellbeasts went after their target. He'd had to resort to using his 3 other masks, which served well to turn his Akatsuki coat into tatters upon his body, but was unnaturally efficient in destroying these creatures. Burns marked his body, and he looked over them all before returning to glare at Rashi. It seemed that this Jinchuriki was much more dangerous, despite having a weaker Biju. Thanks for not killing him yet. Damn it, that blonde Jinchuriki, the one who, it appeared, had humiliated Sasori, had returned. Is Han safe? He's well hidden, if that's what you mean. The blonde replied, looking at Kakuzu and giving him a dark grin, fully prepared to attack Kakuzu before he noticed the hellbeasts made of lava surrounding Kakuzu. Awesome! How'd you make those? The blonde one's voice was filled with wonderment, which annoyed Kakuzu. It's something only I can do, Gaki. Now sit back and watch the fun begin. Kakuzu made another choice he never thought he would do again: retreat. He was obviously outmatched, and once he found Haiden, the two of them would hightail it out of there and into the nearest Akatsuki hideout. It was pure luck that had Haiden returned from his own battle, which was quickly concluded as having ended the same as his, if the red-headed child that rejoined the group across from them was any indication. Haiden, we should retreat. This mission's obviously a failure. Any second now, Haiden would start going on about how retreating was weak and, I agree. What? Kakuzu didn't show it, but he was stunned. Just how strong was his opponent? Kakuzu left that though for another time as the zombie brothers of Akatsuki, for the first time together, retreated. I didn't get to kick any ass. Naruto sounded dejected for a moment before turning to Gaara, and noticing his new black sand and gourd, with white markings upon it. When that happened, Gaara looked over his shoulder at what Naruto was referring to before looking back at his friend. My opponent performed an unknown jutsu on me, one that I have never seen or heard of before. Gaara looked away. I do not wish to speak of it. Okay, Naruto said at length, before Gaara changed the subject. I did not know that you could harness one tail of your beast's power. When did this happen? Naruto looked down and made an motion with his mouth. Sometime during the fight with Kakuzu, he said before turning to Rashi. I don't blame you for what you did. I'd probably do the same thing if I was in your position. Before Rashi could reply, Gaara gave his thoughts on the matter. I did not know you could be so mature, Uzumaki. When did that happen? Naruto turned to face Gaara's smirk, his face in annoyance, and his eyebrow twitching. Again, there are times I can be sensible. Gaara responded with a shrug before turning to Rashi. Do you know of somewhere nearby where we can recuperate? My fight was quite taxing, as was the journey here. As Rashi began explaining that Takigakure was only a few hours' run away, and that they were free to go there and resupply, Naruto heard none of it. Naruto simply stood there, listening as the two redheads conversed. While Gaara didn't appear to look it, he could tell when his friend was getting tired. And Rashi definitely appeared winded. It seemed that using such large-scale and destructive area jutsus were quite tiring on the elder redhead. The two had been the most helpful in the fight, while all he did was get captured. Out of the trio, he was the most injured. It seemed that no matter what Naruto did, he was still too weak, and Akatsuki was too strong. It didn't matter where those two ranked in strength in Akatsuki. All that mattered was that they weren't the leaders, they weren't the strongest, and those two had almost single-handedly defeated 3 Jinchuriki without breaking a sweat. They needed to get stronger. They needed to work together. It was really only luck of the highest degree that they'd killed Kakuzu, no matter how brief a time it was. And so, as the chakra cloak disappeared while Naruto led the group to where he'd hidden Han, Naruto had made up his mind about one thing he would hold absolute. The Jinchuriki needed to band together in order to live the lives they deserved. When Naruto woke up, he was being carried by a clone of Rashi. How'd he know it was a clone? It felt like he'd slept on the ground, and his entire body was sore. And then he remembered what he'd done, and had to forcibly stop himself from moving too much. His entire body felt like it was on fire, and he tried to go back to sleep, but seemed that fate had other plans for him. Good that you're awake, kid. I'd like you to meet Han, my younger brother, Rashi said, and Naruto opened his eyes, blinking away the tears that sprang up from how bright it was before seeing the man he'd helped rescue very clearly tree-hopping next to the Rashi clone with the help of the actual Rashi. Hi, hello? I must thank you for aiding my brother in my safe retrieval, even though I had things under control. His baritone voice started dismissive and ended accusatory. Well, excuse me for helping, Rashi retorted, stopping and looking at his brother. You were not helping, you were hindering. There is a difference, you know, Han stated matter-of-factly, which irked Rashi more, and soon the two were delving into an argument. Oh right, Rashi said mockingly, his eyes rolling dramatically. I apologize for not jumping in to save you when you were unconscious and on your way to your death. I accept your apology, Han blandly stated. That wasn't an apology, you ass. Could have fooled me. A childish argument, in Naruto's opinion, which quickly devolved into something you'd expect of small children, not two men in their mid-20s and 30s. Naruto turned his head away from the embarrassing spectacle, and noticed Gaara, who looked not exactly at peace. Naruto knew that much content. He blinked, trying to fully cope with the image of Gaara presented to him, before his brain stopped gapped in order to protect him from a potential mental breakdown. Better he take some time to get used to seeing Gaara with an almost wistful smile on his face. It reminded Naruto of the few times he'd come across several older kids at the orphanage who'd been doing drugs, the faraway look in their eyes, the half-smile of pure bliss, giggling at random things while bursting out into tears at nothing, crying about their pet fish not wanting to be their friend anymore. Naruto was scared. No, screw scared, he was somewhere between repulsed and freaked out to the extreme. What the hell have you guys been smoking while I was out? That certainly got their attention, bringing Rashi and Han out of their extremely childish fistfight and getting Gaara to look at him in surprise. I do not believe that we have been smoking anything, Naruto, Gaara stated, looking confused. Confused? It was quite clear on Gaara's face, the furrowed eyebrows, the look of concern, and the half-frown. I'll believe it when I see it, Gaara, Naruto said, not missing that he'd been called by his first name. From Gaara, the guy who had kept asking Naruto if it was okay to kill someone. I am serious, Naruto. We have not been smoking any kind of hallucinogenic. Gaara didn't seem to understand what Naruto's problem was. Neither did Rashi or Han. Well, you two I can kinda understand, being brothers and all. He gestured dismissively at the two Iwanin, who appeared affronted at the jab. But I don't get you. Here he pointed at Gaara. Not even a day ago you were asking me for permission to kill, and you were you. Now you look like one of the stoner kids from the orphanage. And let me tell you now, I will kick your ass back to Tsunade if that fight with the Akatsuki guy turned you into one of those people. I was not aware that I was acting different, Gaara said, a sort of bemused look upon his face, which sent Naruto leaning more towards freaked out to the extreme than it did towards repulsed. What happened in your fight with that Akatsuki guy? I do not yet wish to talk of it, Gaara said dismissively. All right, Naruto said, before turning his head towards the brothers next to Naruto's Rashi clone. So, where we heading, Takigakure? Rashi replied, extricating himself from the tangled mess of limbs that he and Han had made of themselves. They've got a neutral treaty with the other elemental nations, so it's alright for shinobi of different nations to go there to hash out their own peace treaties. Or even do like we're doing, rest up and gather supplies. Good, Naruto said, and laid his head back upon the Rashi clone. And Gaara? Yes? Stop being so creepy and go back to your old way of being creepy. Naruto didn't know what made him say that, but that thought was lost when he realized just how comfortable the Rashi clone was. Naruto was shaken awake by some weird takinin, his teal bangs held out of his face by a hair clip that matched his eyes' bright violet color. In the background, Naruto could see Rashi, Han and Gaara, all watching him for some WHOA. As much as Naruto was a normal teenage guy, that didn't mean that he would tolerate other guys feeling him up in a pat-down. Look, sir, I'm sure you're a nice guy. I'm a girl, you are cute and shall be my boyfriend, the androgynous teenage girl said, feeling up Naruto once more for good measure. He sent a glare over to the trio. Han and Rashi had the decency to look away. Gaara didn't. Is there a reason you allowed this girl to molest me in my sleep? We needed a good laugh, Rashi answered, and got a glare in reply. And it appeared to be the best way to wake you, as all other attempts had failed, Gaara stated, sounding much more like his usual self. Besides, boyfriend, I rather enjoyed what I found. Naruto wasn't sure if it was possible for someone to die from blushing, but he felt that he was about to find out if he didn't do something fast. You're not a fun boyfriend. The girl, who had introduced herself as Fu, looked put out as Naruto tried to squirm out of her grip on him. Her presence had gotten the group into Taki quite easily, even if she acted like her fellow Takinin didn't exist. Never said I would be your boyfriend, Naruto replied, failing to get out of the grip she had on him. But you are my boyfriend. Fu said, her face looking extremely serene as she nuzzled Naruto's cheek. And I just love your tattoos. Suddenly, she stopped nuzzling and instead chose to pinch his cheek before caressing Naruto's whisker marks with one of her cocoa-skinned fingers. The action, he secretly noted with slight horror, turned him on somewhat. They're not tattoos, they're birthmarks. And I'd really like you to not touch them, Naruto mumbled out, a pink tinge covering his cheeks. Why not, boyfriend? Fu sounded playful. Naruto shuddered and cursed his luck, listening to the stifled laughter of Rashi and Han behind the two. He swore that he felt some kind of amusement coming from Gaara, and planned to get them back for laughing at his torment. Well, there, that last part came out as an incoherent bunch of sound, which made Fu ask him to repeat it. He mumbled again, and she told him to speak louder. They're sensitive, and your rubbing is making me feel stuff. Rashi decided to screw indiscretion, and opted for outright laughter. Fu looked confused for a second, before understanding went through her face, and she gained a shit-eating grin before leaning in close and licking Naruto's whisker marks, dragging her tongue along each of the black lines. Naruto felt a stirring in between his legs, something he hadn't felt before. Han broke down laughing, and both brothers collapsed in a fit, their laughter going on until Gaara said something that made the two stop faster than the Yondaime Hokage's oration. I do not understand. What is the stuff that Naruto is talking about? Naruto took amusement at the revelation that the only people who could tell him what he was feeling were the very two who were mocking him seconds earlier. Payback's a bitch, ain't it? Unfortunately, the euphoria lasted until they reached the inn they were staying at, where Rashi was able to pull out enough Ryo out of Naruto's blackened backpack to cover the cost of 2 conjoined rooms before saying that Naruto had to prepare if he was gonna take Fu out on a date that evening. Ignoring Naruto's protests, he was tossed into Rashi's grip, who hoisted the blonde over his shoulder and led the way to their rooms. So, Rashi began, setting Naruto down upon one of the 2 beds in one of the rooms they just paid for, with my hard-earned money. Before you start, I'm gonna explain to you the both of you here. He looked at Gaara just what the Gaki was experiencing. For some reason, a small part of Naruto's mind was screaming for him to run like a bat out of hell, but he ignored it in favor of quelling his curiosity. You see, when a boy reaches your age, his body begins to change. Rashi began, and Naruto paled once he realized just what was happening. His body betrayed him, staying frozen on the spot, so he had no choice but to listen. For example, you'll find that hair starts growing in strange places. Gods kill me. Rashi was a professional, and as a professional, he was able to move past his own reservations to get the job done. Once, during the Third Great Shinobi World War, he'd had to slaughter an entire platoon of fresh genin, small children not older than 10 years old. He was able to push aside his emotions and killed them all. That's how much of a professional he was, and yet he never once, in all his years as a shinobi, had to give something as embarrassing as the talk. He barely remembered receiving the talk from his older brother, and the extra embarrassment from giving it to Han some years after that. But as embarrassing as it was being on the receiving end of the talk, he found that it was just as, if not more so, giving the talk. But Rashi was a professional, so he did what all exemplary shinobi did in the face of such situations. He repressed the hell out of his emotions for cathartic release later in life. Usually, the cathartic release of all his pent-up emotions came out in embarrassing the hell out of whomever he saw first, but this time, the embarrassment part was set up before the emotional repression, which would make it all worth it in the end. So he continued his explanation of the baby-making experience, sometimes with jury-rigged visual aids, and reveled in the fact that it was gonna pay off when Naruto went on his date. Naruto fidgeted. Fu stood there, assessing him. Fidget. Stare. An itch in his nose. Stare. The itch felt annoying, like a bug was dancing on his skin. But he didn't scratch it, for fear of angering the girl, no, the woman in front of him. And if there was one thing he knew about women, it was that they were the scariest thing on earth. Fu kept staring at him, as if expecting him to Right. He extended his arm, his elbow bent at just the right angle. Fu smiled, wrapped her own arm around his and then proceeded to get obscenely close to him. Naruto looked up slightly to get a better look at her face. While he may have grown a bit in the past month that he'd been wandering, the older girl still had a good few inches on him. So she began. Where we gonna go? Naruto stalled for time. This was his first time in Takigakure, and he had no idea of where the best restaurants were, nor of the best places to take the semi-crazed woman. Well, I recently came into a small fortune, so the tactic worked as Fu began to gush about going to this fancy place called Ryujin-jaka before leading Naruto there. Ryujin-jaka turned out to be one of the oddest places Naruto ever did see. It was located in the roots of the giant tree, but inside wasn't at all what Naruto expected. There were fancy works of art upon the walls, which was fitting for the air of the restaurant. The entire place was a bright golden yellow, with intricate mosaic designs of famed ninjas scattered across the ceiling, which was reflected in the white marble floor. All in all, it was the kind of place that Naruto normally wouldn't be caught dead in. Table for 2, please, Naruto asked as the pair approached the placeholder. The man spotted the pair, and gave a small smile to Naruto. Yes, of course, he answered. And who will be joining you this fine evening? This nice young woman, Naruto answered, looking confused, and gesturing to the girl latched onto his arm. What nice young woman? The placeholder questioned. All I see with you is a rabid creature, which must leave if you wish to dine here. Naruto was shocked at the man's answer, before sudden understanding came across his mind as memories of villagers from Suna and Konoha flitted through his mind. Well, then I guess you won't have my services, if you aren't willing to serve all who come through those doors, Naruto answered, his rage quiet and controlled for the moment. Just know I'll spread word of this to everyone I know, if you must. The placeholder sighed, before going back to scheduling where to seat the reservations. You said you'd take me somewhere special, Fu whined, being all but dragged by Naruto as the two left Ryujin-jaka. Besides, I see plenty of tables where we can sit. I already said I won't eat where someone denies a customer service, Naruto answered, leading her outside and onto the emptying street. Now, which one do you have? One what? Fu looked confused at Naruto's sudden question. I've seen people behave like that before. Hell, I practically had that happen to me several times. Naruto was almost yelling at her by the end, and stopped when he saw the look Fu was giving him like he was the dirt beneath her feet. Like how you're looking at me right now. Fu almost flinched, but she just looked at him haughtily. If you must know, I am the Jinchuriki of the Nanabai no Kabutomushi, the seven-tailed horned beetle. Well, that makes my job much easier. Someone said from above them before Naruto found that he couldn't move properly because what the hell? There was a white person growing from the two of them. Rashi and Han stood a distance away as Naruto met with Fu and the two began their date. Or rather, Fu began dragging a despairing Naruto to their destination. Rashi. The voice was not unexpected, as both Iwaan had sensed Gaara follow them ever since they'd sent Naruto on his way. Yeah, kid? Rashi said somewhat distractedly as the brothers started following Naruto from a safe distance. I'd like to talk to you about something. There was an undercurrent of fear and confusion, which combined meant that Gaara wasn't quite comfortable with what they were about to discuss. I've already explained puberty and sex, don't expect me to help you get a girl. It is not that, Gaara said, sending a half-hearted glare at the older man. I wish to talk to you about something I've been feeling ever since my fight with that Akatsuki member. This have anything to do with your attitude change? Rashi said, leaving his brother to go on ahead and keep watch over the blonde Gaki and take notes on anything that could be useful, blackmail, or otherwise. Gaara raised an eyebrow, confusion becoming more apparent on his face. I was not aware that my attitude has changed any. It hasn't really, but you keep having his look on your face, like you're really content. Rashi explained. I'm guessing that Akatsuki guy did something. Yes. Gaara took a breath, not sure how to properly explain. He used some kind of jutsu. I do not know what it was, but it changed him. He became completely black, and had these white markings all over, like a skeleton. His entire body, too, changed. Not just his skin, it became thinner, to the point where I could see the shadow of each of his ribs and could read his pulse from simply looking at him. His weapon changed as well, the sides becoming longer and closer together. He attacked me, and my sand acts as a defense. Nothing can get past it, but his weapon did, and brought with it things. Things? Here Rashi was the confused one, but he didn't press the issue, allowing Gaara to explain in his own time. His weapon went through my sand, and the countless people I've killed spilled forth. Gaara continued. Leading them was the first person I killed, my uncle. Rashi cringed slightly. While relations between him and his family weren't perfect, they weren't bad enough that they tried to kill him or Han. He was able to injure me, though it appeared to only be a glancing blow, which my opponent used to create this strange shape upon the ground that he stood within. Soon after, the changes to his body began reversing, and they happened to me instead. A curse jutsu. Rashi breathed. He'd only heard rumors that such things existed, and the closest he'd come to confirming their existence were cursed seals. Perhaps, but it is what caused my sand to become the black that it is now, which I was able to use to kill the dead assassins. Gaara was finishing up his story, Rashi could tell, and remained silent. As I killed them, I found that the changes to my body were disappearing, though my sand remained as it is. When it was done, I turned to the Akatsuki member and told him my name, and how I was to be the one to kill him, before he ran. Rashi remained silent, as several things became apparent, but prominently was the fact that he had a fair idea of what had changed with Gaara. It sounds like you rid yourself of the burden of having killed all those people, though I assume that the original purpose was to weaken you enough so that you would be killed by those you yourself had killed. And how does that equate to my supposed change in demeanor, and this feeling I have within me? Well, it means that you're at peace with yourself. What you feel inside is closure, I guess, and the fact that you've found somewhere you belong. Rashi was about to continue when he felt Han's chakra flare. We're done here. Something's up with the Gaki's date. Han, despite all outward appearances to the contrary, was a rather easygoing person. If someone took the time to get to know him, then they'd find out that he was rather kind despite the gruff, dutiful ninja persona he'd created for himself. Which was why he was shocked when Naruto had, instead of choosing to mouth off at the placeholder, as he seemed like the type to do so, politely told off the man and left. Now, he was yelling at the girl, who revealed that she was a Jinchuriki herself. And then something quite strange happened. White people had begun growing from the bodies of the two teens he was watching, similar to a fungus or some kind of parasite, and Han took notice of a thing coming out of the ground as he jumped down to aid them in the attack, his steam armor quickly engulfing his entire form. He turned to face this new, mysterious opponent. Thing was an apt description. Despite looking altogether human, the giant leaves on either side of him, which disappeared within the Akatsuki cloak, were the most obvious telling feature that it wasn't human. The second most telling feature was that half of its body was a sort of greenish-white, with the other side was pitch black, yet both had yellow eyes. The white side blinked at him in surprise, while nothing could be seen as defining features upon the black side outside of the eye, which was open wider than was humanly possible. Well, this is unexpected. The mouth moved on the white half, while the black half didn't so much as twitch a single muscle. Not exactly, you imbecile. It's plainly clear that someone would notice. We just didn't plan for them to react so fast. A second voice said, and suddenly Han felt extremely uncomfortable, watching the creature in front of him while reaching down to rip apart the things that were growing over Naruto and Fu. As soon as his steam-covered hands touched the white fungus people, they began to hiss and burn, trying to move away from his hands, which wouldn't relinquish their hold upon the creatures until they were completely removed from the two teens. That doesn't mean we have to fight him, now does it? The white side's yellow eye turned to look at the black side, and Han realized just where the other voice came from. Both sides were two different people. Of course not. This is why we should have waited until Kakuzu was able to give us backup. The black half replied, and Han had a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach. Do you mean the masked one of your ranks? Han questioned. The one who hails from this village? Well, will you look at that? The white side mocked. He knows who we're talking about. It paused for a second before saying hey. Wasn't he Kakuzu's target? Shit. The black one said. So you are also of this Akatsuki? Han said, looking calmly at the thing. Then I cannot fend you off on my own. And then he flared his chakra. Naruto felt weak as hell. The fungus people had sapped him of all his energy, and his arms were kept apart, so he couldn't use any of his jutsu. Wait, CLS jutsu. That's it. As soon as Han ripped the fungus person thing off of him, he felt some of his chakra return, though it would still be a while before he was at full power again. But it was enough. Standing up, Han looked over at him, surprised. You are weakened, he stated. No shit, Naruto replied, one hand still on the ground as he crouched. But that doesn't mean that I'm gonna miss out on this chance to kick some Akatsuki ass. He made a face as he stood up. Besides, I didn't get to do anything in the last fight with them. Han chuckled, impressed with the blonde's priorities. What's this Akatsuki? Fu said, getting up and leaning on Naruto for support. You don't know? Naruto was surprised. He already figured that people like Gaara didn't know, and he suspected that Rashi and Han knew of Akatsuki, though most likely for different reasons. But he didn't expect Fu, someone who came from a neutral country, to have no idea of what Akatsuki was, considering that one of their members came from Taki. He internally sighed, and wondered if Konoha was a much different place than he thought it was, if they were the only place that knew of the organization and hadn't bothered to warn the elemental nations. Akatsuki are evil guys who want to remove our Biju to take over the world. Then what are we doing standing around when we could be killing them? Fu gave him a dark smile before stomping her right foot down and pushing both fists forward with as much exertion as possible. The others were confused for only the briefest of moments before the ground itself rose into a spike where the Akatsuki member was, who dodged it. What the Naruto was shocked, and he looked to Han for an explanation, but it appeared that what Fu had done was something unknown to him, also. Fu, meanwhile, was doing her level best to kill the Akatsuki member, stomping one foot down, which sent a block of earth into the air, where she pushed forward with one of her wrists, her fingers curled into a fist, which sent a piece of earth flying towards the Akatsuki member, who dodged several of these before disappearing into the ground. Don't worry, we'll be back to get the Nanabai. The white side taunted as the Akatsuki member literally melted into the ground, and then Rashi and Gaara appeared, looking battle-ready. Took you long enough, you missed it, Naruto said, slightly pissed off. He still hadn't been able to fight against an Akatsuki. He turned to Fu. What the hell was that jutsu? That wasn't really a jutsu, she answered. The Nanabai is really powerful with earth release, so much so that it was almost like it could move the very earth however it saw fit. I got that power from it, so it's like a Kekkai Genkai? At her nod, he looked ecstatic. Awesome, I knew boyfriend would love it, Fu said, once again latching onto Naruto's arm and rubbing against his whisker marks, making him become extremely fidgety and his face incredibly red. Leaving was a rather silent affair. Naruto and Gaara agreed that going east sounded like a good idea. While Rashi and Han prepped to return to Iwa, well, Han was gonna go back to Iwa, while Rashi was gonna continue to wander around the land of Earth. Naruto didn't want them to do this. I don't think that we should split up, Naruto said, once they were outside. He'd somehow convinced Fu to lead the group outside of the village, where they were preparing to go their separate ways. Oh, boyfriend, Fu gushed. I knew you liked me, not just us, Fu, Naruto replied. Go ask Gaara about his sand or something, okay? K. She cheerfully replied before going and pestering the former Tsunade about how he was able to work his sand. Naruto sighed and turned to the brothers. We shouldn't split up. Naruto was never one for subtlety, and he wasn't gonna start now. Now, Gaki, as much fun as it was with you, we can't, Rashi replied, with Han hesitating before nodding assent. We have our allegiance to Iwa, for starters. Screw the hidden villages. Naruto didn't quite know where that came from, but it felt like the right thing to say. After all, this entire speech was being played by ear, which was how he usually got people to side with him. Before you cross paths with them, did you ever hear or Akatsuki? No, but nothing. How can you protect your villages when they won't even tell you of threats to your lives? Naruto's voice slowly rose, garnering the attention of Fu and Gaara, who were in the middle of discussing the powers their individual Biju gave them. If another one of us hadn't appeared, then Han would be dead by now. Fu would have been captured. We'll find and help each other like we did before, Rashi said. And when that fails? Naruto countered. Face it, you won't be there to save each other every time Akatsuki comes for one of you, and their members seem to be given the Jinchuriki they have an advantage against. You don't know that, Rashi countered, and it turned into an argument between him and Naruto, with Han finding himself standing to the side with Gaara and Fu, entering their conversation about Biju-given abilities. The one targeting me is the Uchiha Itachi, one of the greatest genjutsu users in all the elemental nations, Naruto responded. So? Rashi didn't get it. So, Naruto drawled out, I can't break Genjutsu to save my life. Then learn how to, Gaki. Naruto was irritated at that point. Even if I did, he would still win. He can use the weird black flames that look to eat through anything, Naruto said, driving his point home. He's the most well-rounded shinobi you'll ever find, and it doesn't matter if I can use Kyuubi's chakra, he'll still win against me, like that Kakuzu guy did against Han and us. Rashi paused, and Naruto took a second to catch his breath. Off to the side, the trio had foregone their conversation for a later time, now watching the argument. You're right. You're damn right I'm right, Naruto said. So you in or not? I'm in, Rashi answered, his hand out to shake on it. Good. IDV pestered you until you said yes if you didn't, anyway. Naruto grinned as he met Rashi's hand, and the two sealed the deal. After all, who's gonna teach me nature manipulation? Don't push it, Gaki. Again. Rashi barked out, and the mass of blondes in front of him slammed their palms upon the other in the hopes of cutting through the leaf that each one of them held. He watched as one of them cheered, having made progress, before dispelling itself. The rest of the clones stopped for a microsecond before identical looks of determination overtook their faces as they learned from their dispelled comrade. It had been almost 2 weeks since they'd chosen to follow the blonde, his plan to have them protect each other sounding both idiotic and ingenious. He didn't know which was worse, that the plan was idiotic enough to potentially work, or that it was ingenious enough to not fail. In the time since then, they'd entered the land of hot water, which was just devoid enough of life that they could suitably train without any outside sources finding them. When Rashi asked Naruto to list all the jutsu he knew, the man was floored at how small the list was. No hidden village worth their salt would deliberately let a Jinchuriki in their possession not be at least B rank in strength by the time they were the Naruto's age. Hell, Gaara was in the same boat as the blonde, and he was still stronger. Not to mention, Naruto had learned the identity of both of his parents, something all orphaned children desperately wanted to know all their lives. The fact that everyone he knew and trusted potentially knew the identity of his parents had caused a major change in the blonde. He'd been quieter, almost somber at times, for a few days after they'd left Takigakure, before one morning the blonde caused all of them to nearly have heart attacks at just how chipper the boy had been. All of them, even Gaara, were afraid to find out what had changed in the boy's mind, but Rashi had a hunch at what it was. The boy was bottling up all his emotions. There were 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. While these were mostly used when describing coping with the death of a loved one, they were also quite apt in the description of how a person copes when their entire life has been upended. And he suspected that Naruto was still in the first stage, despite all outward appearances to the contrary. Also, the blonde appeared to be quite dismissive of 2 of the jutsu he knew, Toad Summoning and Rasengan, both widely known by their use by the Yondaime Hokage. Rashi knew that continued repression would lead to horrible things, maybe even having the blonde snapping and becoming the very creature his peers thought of him when he was little. But he wouldn't approach the blonde, rather, he'd wait until the blonde approached him, and would counsel the boy as best he could, based upon his own experiences with his family. And if given a chance, he would change so many things that had happened to his own family, things he'd said, things he'd done. And it appeared that he had the chance, with Naruto. Rashi was snapped out of his musings when he noticed that all the clones had briefly stopped. Again. He snapped out, watching as the clones went back to work. Fu stood in a large clearing, the ground around her devoid of any life, while the dry forest threatened to encroach upon her spot. Her entire body was tense, though the rigid way she held herself was the only way that one could know that she was prepared for battle. There was a single sound amidst the quiet, that her fight was producing the slight thumping of a person landing upon the ground. There, she slammed 2 open fists, connected at the wrists, towards the sound, sending a square-shaped piece of earth shooting out right where the thump had emanated from. There was a curse before the wind brought a wisp of smoke out from the spot hidden among the sparse greenery. Damn. She pulled her arms back in and returned them to her side, waiting for the next telltale sign of her opponent's location. Naruto was barely winded, though his lungs were beginning to feel the ache of exertion. That last attack had been close. Too close. Thankfully, he was able to make a clone some distance away and substitute with it just as the attack hit. Had his jutsu been any slower, he'd have been hit, and the battle lost. Taking stock of his situation, he was able to spy on his opponent, seeing her in that same stance as before, rigid with her arms by her side, fingers curled and ready to take down any opposition. Flipping through his recently gotten weapons pouch, he saw that he had several yards of ninja wire, a half-dozen kunai, along with a few explosive notes. Suddenly, an idea came to his mind, and he knew exactly what to do.